370. On New Year's Eve, Dusty Medicine Shop had bought a lot of red paper for the Spring Festival couplets. There was 1 at the shop's entrance and 3 at the back of the shop, making a total of 4 Spring Festival couplets. Chen Pinggan, Pei Qian, Zheng Dafeng, and Lu Baixiang each wrote a couplet. They copied the contents from a small booklet they bought from the market without paying too much attention. Chen Pinggan's writing was proper, Lu Baixiang's writing was elegant, and Zheng Dafeng's writing was also very good. Pei Qian volunteered to write a piece, and in the end, he wrote very carefully, but it was quite disdainful. Zhu Lian kept shaking his head, and even Wei Xian said that it was well written, but it was a pity that it was difficult to compare. Pei Qian also felt guilty. He didn't expect Chen Pinggan to say that it was just a festive occasion. Pei Qian, Wei Xian, and Sui Yuyu were in charge of moving stools and ladders, getting rice milk, and putting up the couplets. Chen Pinggan and Zheng Dafeng were on the side pointing fingers. Pei Qian admitted that he didn't write the couplets well, so he had to put them up properly. This made the skinny little girl, who wanted to atone for her mistake, sweat profusely. In the end, Sui Yuyu asked Chen Pinggan and Zheng Dafeng to shut up. Only then did Pei Qian succeed. The spring characters were written by Chen Pinggan, and the Fu characters were written by Zheng Dafeng. Zhu Lian was cooking for the New Year's Eve dinner. Chen Pinggan and Pei Qian helped wash and cut the vegetables. Sui Yuyu came to the kitchen and stood at the door for a while, then left. Finally, Zhu Lian brought out a table full of meat and vegetables. It was a sumptuous New Year's Eve dinner. The main dish was a big braised fish, which meant more than 1 year. The main dish was a pot of stewed pork trotters. Chen Pinggan and Pei Qian helped to open it with a pair of chopsticks. Zheng Dafeng sat at the head of the table, facing south. Lu Baixiang and Wei Xian sat on Zheng Dafeng's left, while Sui Yuyu and Pei Qian sat on the right. Pei Qian secretly laughed and said that Sister Yuyu should sit on the right, but Sui Yuyu twisted his ear and he immediately begged for mercy. Chen Pinggan and Zhu Lian sat on a bench near the gate. The yin master surnamed Zhao refused to come in and take a seat, so he had no choice but to give up. The wine on the table was the Osmanthus wine produced by the Fan family's Osmanthus Island. The fragrance assailed the nostrils, and when it entered the mouth, it was sweet and had a rich aftertaste. Chen Pinggan saw that Pei Qian was envious and had been busy for half a day without rest. He thought that the Osmanthus wine was not spicy, so he poured a small cup for her. He reminded her that she could only drink this cup of wine on New Year's Day. If she dared to drink it on other days, don't blame him for teaching her a lesson. Pei Qian was like a little chick pecking at rice. Her slightly chubby tanned face was brimming with the innocence and happiness that a child should have. Under Chen Pinggan's insistence, Zheng Dafeng had to be the first to pick up the chopsticks. Only then could the others touch their chopsticks and drink. Zheng Dafeng also had to raise his cup and say a few polite words. Zheng Dafeng, who was originally extremely thick-skinned, was extremely embarrassed. After hesitating for a long time, he finally said something about everyone eating and drinking well, and that everything would go well during the spring festival. Pei Qian took a small sip of the Osmanthus wine, and her eyes lit up. There was actually such a sweet and delicious thing in the world. It seemed that growing up also had some benefits. At that time, she should be able to drink whenever she wanted to, right? At the dinner table, it was noisy. With Pei Qian present, it was difficult to eat in peace. Zheng Dafeng and Chen Pinggan did not talk much about Lizhu Grotto Heaven and Longquan Town. Zheng Dafeng asked more about the strange people in Lotus Flower Blessed Land. The 4 people in the picture scroll were also quite interested in Ding Ying, the world's most powerful person before Chen Pinggan. Then there was the banished immortal Jiang Shengzhen. Chen Pinggan picked some things to talk about. Until here, Zheng Dafeng took the opportunity to talk about the inside story of Lotus Flower Blessed Land and mentioned Lizhu Grotto Heaven. Generally speaking, among the 10 Grotto Heavens and 36 small Grotto Heavens, the reason why Grotto Heaven was called Grotto Heaven was that the spiritual qi was abundant in the world. It was said that the Grotto Heaven reached the sky, and there were all kinds of opportunities left by the ancient immortals, who were either disbanded or ascended. It was the first choice for immortals to cultivate, and it was twice the result with half the effort. For example, the small Wutong Grotto heaven of Tongye sect was monopolized by Du Mao, and he only shared a cup of soup with the practitioners in the upper 5 realms in the sect. However, there were some exceptions, such as the Taoist ancestors' lotus flower blessed land, and of course, Liju Grotto heaven. The latter's spiritual qi was naturally abundant, and it was not known for its heavenly materials and earthly treasures. What was really coveted was the outstanding cultivation aptitude of the people in the small town. In other places in the world, after Earth immortals went down the mountain, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. It was hard to find a good seedling. Even if they found someone with good aptitude, he might not be suitable to accept them as his disciple, or his temperament might not be suitable for the sect's Taoist methods, and so on. Perhaps in the end, they would return to the mountain in disappointment. In Liju Grotto heaven, there were many beautiful cultivators who had the potential to reach the middle 5 states. Even the children of ordinary immortal couples might not have such aptitude for cultivation. After the New Year's Eve dinner, everyone changed into new clothes. At first, Wei Xian was not very willing to wear new clothes. He said that if he could not wear new clothes, he could wear the dragon robe. The new clothes did not fit him well, and he felt uncomfortable. After being pestered by Pei Qian for a long time, he finally agreed to change into new clothes and boots. In order to suit the occasion, Chen Pinggan temporarily took off his golden robe and changed into a green robe that Pei Qian and Sui Yuyu helped to choose for him. Chen Pinggan gave Pei Qian, Picture Scroll, and the other 4 people a New Year's money. Each of them received a piece of snow money wrapped in red paper. Pei Qian knew that this piece of immortal money was worth 1,000 taels of silver, and he was overjoyed. The other 4 people accepted it, and naturally, they were not as happy as Pei Qian. After that, it was time to keep watch. In the end, only Chen Pinggan, Zheng Dafeng, and Pei Qian were left. They sat around the stove until dawn. Chen Pinggan crossed one leg, and the little lotus figure sat on the instep of his leg. When Chen Pinggan shook his leg, the little guy was overjoyed. Chen Pinggan did not dare to drink too much of the medicinal wine in the sword-nurturing gourd. He and Zheng Dafeng drank for the whole night, and each of them only drank half a catty of Osman-thus wine. Zheng Dafeng talked about many people in the town who were about the same age as Chen Pinggan, Ma Kushuan, Song Jisin, Zhao Yarou, Lin Shuyi, and the younger ones, Li Baoping and Ji Yukan. He said that the most unexpected thing was that Chen Pinggan not only survived, but also reached this stage today. Pei Qian was actually asleep in the second half of the night, so he did not hear the story of Liju Cave. Zheng Dafeng took the initiative to ask about Chen Pinggan's natal porcelain. Chen Pinggan smiled and said that it was a white porcelain paperweight, roughly in the shape of a dragon. He left some broken porcelain relics behind, but there were not many. They were secretly in the corner of the ancestral house in the Mud Bottle Alley. If everything went as expected, once it was baked, it would not be placed on the desk of the Emperor of Great Li's study as an imperial tribute. Most likely, it would be hidden in some immortal's mansion on the mountain. According to the Sword Immortal, the leader of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, Chen Pinggan should have the aptitude of an Earth Immortal. Zheng Dafeng did not continue. Chen Pinggan did not make things difficult for Zheng Dafeng. The involvement was too deep. It just so happened that Chen Pinggan had enough patience and perseverance. Zheng Dafeng finally pointed outside the house. Old Zhao, it's the ancestor of Zhao Yarou's branch in Liju Cave. After he died, he collected the soul of our old man. Demigod. Half-yin spectre. If you're lucky, you can throw it out and become the god of some mountain in the Dali dynasty. However, I definitely can't expect Wei Ba to rise to the heavens in a single step, going from a small mountain god to a righteous god that covers half of the continent. However, I do have a chance to become like Ji Yukan's father, who oversees the luck of mountains and rivers within 1,000 miles. Chen Pinggan nodded and said, I've guessed it. Mr. Qi had left 3 wisps of spring breeze, one on Chen Pinggan, one on Zhao Yarou, and one on Song Jisin. Zhao Yarou did not manage to keep the most precious Chun seal, but Mr. Qi said that he was not disappointed. Chen Pinggan did not understand at first. With Mr. Qi's temperament, it was not because he did not have high hopes for Zhao Yarou that he was not disappointed. In fact, Mr. Qi valued Zhao Yarou more than Song Jisin. Now that he thought about it, Mr. Qi actually hoped that Zhao Yarrow would take this opportunity to completely cut ties with his literary lineage. Whether Zhao Yarrow established his own lineage or joined another literary lineage, he might be able to live a peaceful life. Mr. Qi was already gratified. Chen Pinggan admitted that he could not be as open-minded as Mr. Qi. In the future, when he read more books and met more people, he might be able to, but not today. Regarding Ma Kuxuan's identity in the Apricot Blossom Alley, Zheng Dafeng revealed a bit of a secret. He said that the white cat that Ma Kuxuan relied on had a great origin and was very lucky. Compared to the Great Sui Kingdom's Dragon King basket and golden carp, Wan Xiu's fire dragon bracelet, Zhao Yarrow's wooden dragon carving, Ji Yukan's little loach, and Song Jisin's four-legged snake, it was even better. However, unlike the latter five, the white cat would only recognize Ma Kuxuan as its master when it sneaked into Lizhu Cave. Chen Pinggan told Zheng Dafeng about the two fights he had with Ma Kuxuan. One was in the immortal tomb in his hometown, and the other was on the streets of Tsai Kingdom. Zheng Dafeng laughed and did not take it too seriously. He said that every 1,000 or 500 years, there would be a pair of people in Lizhu Cave. They were either enemies or close friends. The latter was like the Cao Yuan duo of the Dali dynasty. This time, it might be the two of them. Ma Kuxuan in the Apricot Blossom Alley, and Chen Pinggan in the Mud Bottle Alley. Chen Pinggan turned his head and looked at the sky outside. It was the morning of the first day of the Lunar New Year. Last year at this time, he was still wandering around Lotus Blossom-blessed land like a lonely ghost. It felt like a lifetime ago. After Pei Qian woke up, it immediately went to the alley outside the pharmacy to set off firecrackers. However, perhaps because it was a year older, it was very obedient. It first asked Zhao's yin spirit if setting off firecrackers would scare it. The yin spirit smiled and said that it was fine. Hearing the continuous sounds of firecrackers from the alley, Zheng Dafeng suddenly said, Pei Qian can restrain some of her instincts if she stays by your side. What will she do if she leaves you in the future? Chen Pinggan thought for a while. Try to teach her the difference between good and evil before she leaves me. Only after doing this can we talk about getting close to good and getting rid of evil. Otherwise, she will be muddle-headed no matter what she does. Chen Pinggan used the tip of his foot to draw a circle on the ground. Without rules, nothing can be accomplished. She is still young, so she can do whatever she wants within this circle that I have drawn for her. However, if she does something outside of this circle, I will give her a warning and teach her some principles. Let's take it slow. It can't be done overnight. After the new year, she is only 11 years old, but she is already doing well. Zheng Dafeng laughed. How can she compare to you? Chen Pinggan smiled. Why should she compare to me? Pei Qian is Pei Qian, and Chen Pinggan is Chen Pinggan. Zheng Dafeng sighed. Pei Qian is lucky to have met you. Chen Pinggan turned to look at Zheng Dafeng. Zheng Dafeng, aren't you the same after meeting me? I have only passed by Old Dragon City twice, and I have to be both your preacher and protector. It is very tiring, okay? Zheng Dafeng clicked his tongue. You are not bad as a preacher, but as a protector, you are really not that good. Chen Pinggan laughed loudly. He cupped his fists and joked without any sincerity. Forgive me, forgive me. As a fifth realm martial artist, I can't be any better. Zheng Dafeng rolled his eyes and lamented, how am I going to find a wife in the future? Pei Qian took a feather duster and carried it on her shoulder. She said that she wanted to let the mountain traveling staff rest. When she reached the backyard, she said good things to everyone she met, hoping that old Wei could quickly find a beautiful wife. She hoped that Xiao Bai could become better at chess and strive to become the 100th player in the world. She hoped that the elder sister on the right would become younger and not have wrinkles for the rest of her life. She hoped that Zhu Lian could make better food this year. She hoped that Grandpa Yin God Zhao's realm would soar, and he would bring her to play in the sky in the future. She hoped that Zheng Dafeng's shop would prosper. Pei Qian hoped that Chen Pinggan's money would come rolling in the new year. She could not stop it. She could not even stuff all the gold, silver, and treasures into it. It was obvious that she did not want to be a money loser in the new year. It was unknown if Pei Qian's luck had changed. She had changed from a little crow's mouth that even Zhu Lian was afraid of, to a mouth of gold and jade that was effective on the day. On the first day of the first lunar month, according to the customs of the Baoping continent, one would not welcome guests, travel far, or work. They only cared about eating, drinking, and playing. However, Fan Junmaro still came to Dusty Medicine Shop in the morning. Other than asking Chen Pinggan when he would go to Yunhai to refine his natal item, he brought 3 bags of gold fine copper coins for Chen Pinggan. There were 3 bags of gold fine copper coins, 1 for victory, 1 for offering, and 1 for welcoming spring. There were more than 30 coins in total. They were all from the Song clan's emperor's own pocket. He also promised that there would be more in the future. As the Dali cavalry went south, they could even break the golden bodies of some mountain gods who did not know what was good for them, not to mention the forbidden temples of various countries. The fragments could be used to make gold fine copper coins. Chen Pinggan looked at Zheng Dafeng. The latter was also confused. It's similar to Liju Grotto Heaven's natal porcelain. Aren't the gold fine copper coins no longer made? Fan Junmaro sneered. So this is where the Song clan's sincerity lies. Otherwise, how can they appear to be generous? Zheng Dafeng thought for a while. Unless the old man is pressuring the Song clan's emperor, the Dali dynasty would not cut their flesh like this. These fragments of the golden bodies are kept and used to paint the golden bodies of the other 3 mountain gods in the future. It's more cost-effective. Chen Pinggan nodded in agreement. Zheng Dafeng was a little confused. It doesn't seem like the old man's style. Fan Junmaro said in annoyance. Previously, there was a cross-continent ferry that was heading south from the North Continent. Originally, it would not stop at the Dragon Spring ferry. In the end, a man fell from the sky and landed on the ground. Now, there are so many powerhouses in the West Mountains. They are building mansions. There are so many people. This news has already spread to the north of the Aquarius continent. Everyone knows that other than Song Jianqiang, the Aquarius continent also has a legendary martial artist of the 10th level. Zheng Dafeng wiped his face and said, "There's no doubt about it. It's just that we don't know when he will reach our old dragon city." Fan Junmao had an idea. According to the Dragon Spring Fairy's journey, if he is willing to spend money, he should reach Old Dragon City in the next few days. Zheng Dafeng counted with his fingers and laughed. From the North Continent to the Dali dynasty in the north of the Aquarius continent, and then to the southernmost here. It's quite a rush. But I think the old man stopped him. Zheng Dafeng asked softly, "What about the Tongyi sect?" Fan Junmaro sneered. Those trashy earth immortals in Old Dragon City, how would they dare to cross the sea to Tongyi continent to scout for information? Originally, the Aquarius continent is inferior. Tongyi sect is also the most domineering mountain in Tongyi continent. No one wants to provoke them. Some of the inside stories, at most, only the Fu clan knows a little. The other clans, regarding the movements of the Tongyi sect, are like blind people. However, I think there is a big problem at the Tongyi sect. Otherwise, the Fu clan would not take out 3 bags of gold essence copper coins in the Dali dynasty. Other than the old dragon cloth rain pendant, Fu Qi also took out something that I did not expect. He wanted me to pass it to Chen Pinggan. But Fu Qi also said that he still needs to discuss this matter with the Fu clan's ancestral hall. But he will try to pass the agenda. When will Chen Pinggan leave Old Dragon City and arrive? Why don't the 2 of you guess? Chen Pinggan quickly called Pei Qian, who was in the courtyard, to his side. He roughly explained the situation of the Fu clan and then said earnestly, "You guess. Guess if the item is good." Pei Qian thought carefully and said timidly, "Could it be a half-immortal weapon?" Fan Junmaro was speechless. Chen Pinggan and Zheng Dafeng looked at each other and laughed. On the 5th day of the first lunar month, other than the old man who stayed in the dusty medicine shop and ate melon seeds and chatted, Pei Qian accompanied him and talked like a chicken and a duck. One old and one young, each bragged. Today, the medicine shop had another customer. A short and strong man walked into the alley. The old man sitting on the bench could not help but take a few more glances. Indeed, the man in front of him was much rarer than the jade unpolished realm cultivators on the mountain. Although the 4 people in the painting did not see this person with their own eyes, They were almost scared at the same time. It was a kind of feeling between pure martial artists. In the backyard, Wei Xian, Zhu Lian, and the other 3 people, when the man walked slowly to the medicine shop, they saw a huge dragon forcibly squeezing into a stream ditch. There was actually such a martial artist in the world. After seeing that Chen Pinggan and Zheng Dafeng were not nervous, the 4 people in the painting finally relaxed. Wei Xian rubbed his chin with his palm and Zhu Lian's eyes were burning. Lu Baixiang and Sui Youyou stopped playing chess. Sui Yoyo's finger gently tapped an idle chess piece in front of him. Chen Pinggan and Zheng Dafeng walked to the front of the shop together. Zheng Dafeng bent over and looked left and right. The first thing he said was, "Why didn't sister-in-law come?" The man looked at Zheng Dafeng. There was not much expression on his wooden face. "If master did not ask me to wait, I would have been at the top of the Tongyi sect's mountain." Zheng Dafeng scratched his head and did not speak. Then the man looked at Chen Pinggan and cupped his fists. "Chen Pinggan, on that long trip, Li Huai has become much more sensible. Moreover, it is not something that can be learned from books. I, Li have to thank you. Back then, Mr. Qi taught Li Huai well. Now that Mr. Qi has left, you have taught him well. I actually have to call you Mr. Chen. Today, I still have to rush to Tongyi Continent to tear down Du Mao's ancestral hall, so I won't talk much. Anyway, it's just a few crude words. Usually, only when someone in the family is bullied, I, Li will punch. But I promise that in the future, if you, Chen Pinggan, send someone to tell me to punch whoever you want me to punch, I will immediately rush over and punch them. If I even frown, I am not Li Huai's father." Li cupped his fists again and said in a low voice, "I'm leaving." The man left just like that. 371. After Li arrived at Old Dragon City, the situation in Old Dragon City became clear. Although this 10th realm martial artist only showed his face in the dusty medicine shop, it could be said that he had decided everything. Maybe the 4 great families, including the Sun family, still did not know, but the development of the situation was just following the prescribed order. The abacuses and account books in Old Dragon City would continue to move north, getting closer and closer to the Song clan's cavalry that was already stationed in the middle of the Aquarius continent. Regarding this, the Fu family, the Fan family and the Dusty Medicine Shop were the first 3 to know the answer. On the day that Li left, the Fan family swaggered over to pay a New Year's visit. They were all Chen Pinggan's acquaintances. Fan Junmaro and Fan were not mentioned. There was also Osmanthus Island's Aunt Gui and her only direct disciple, Jin Su, who served Chen Pinggan when he went to the Inverted Mountain. Lastly, the old Jindan sword cultivator, Ma Ji, who fed Chen Pinggan his sword for a period of time. Aunt Gui almost never went ashore. Osmanthus Island's trip to Old Dragon City and the Inverted Mountain twice a year, but even many old people in the Fan family's ancestral hall had never seen her in their entire lives. In Zhu Lian's eyes, the foreign old man who was very knowledgeable originally thought that today would be another boring day, and he would not even see the woman surnamed Sui. He did not expect to see so many women at once. The old man who sat in front of the medicine shop and ate melon seeds almost said that he was the shop assistant of the Dusty Medicine Shop. He was very busy and attentive. After crossing the door of the medicine shop, Aunt Gui looked at the strange old man, and the old man happened to look at her. Aunt Gui suppressed the doubts in her heart and smiled slightly. The old man thought that although this lady had an ordinary appearance, she had a gentle temperament. She was the first choice of an ordinary man to marry and bring home a wife and children. No wonder Jiang Shangzhen's eldest son, who only cared about giving birth, wanted to use the name of his sect to pressure her, hoping to buy Osmanthus Island's ferry route from the Fan family. Aunt Gui could not see the depth of the old man's background, but she vaguely felt that the old man's body was clean, his qi was light, and his spirit was full. If he was temporarily an earth immortal, he would definitely have the talent of the upper 5 realms in the future. After all, there were differences among the earth immortals. Chen Pinggan jogged out to welcome Aunt Gui. Towards this senior, Chen Pinggan had always been grateful. It had nothing to do with Aunt Gui's status or cultivation. Back then, when he took Osmanthus Island to the Inverted Mountain, he passed by Jiaolong Gully and encountered a great calamity. Chen Pinggan entered a state of emptiness for a moment, as if he was a Buddhist. Chen Pinggan was caught off guard and felt that the world was full of evil intentions. After that, he was depressed for a period of time in the small courtyard. After that, when he thought of Osmanthus Island, there were only two sources of warmth. One was the painter from the Fan family who helped Chen Pinggan draw 3 paintings, and the other was Aunt Gui, who had seen all kinds of things in the world and always had a peaceful state of mind. Fan pretended to go to Zheng Dafeng's residence, only to find that the exquisite portrait wasn't hanging on the wall. Chen Pinggan and Aunt Gui were chatting in the hall outside. Inside the room, Zheng Dafeng coughed and said without batting an eyelid, "Conserve your energy and cultivate your character. In the future, don't do such immoral things." At first, Fan thought it sounded like Sir Fan's tone, but the more he listened, the more he felt it wasn't right. Fan's face immediately filled with anger, and he said regretfully, "It's my painter's fault. He took the liberty of misinterpreting my meaning. My original intention was that a fair and virtuous woman was a good match for a gentleman. Since Sir Fan wholeheartedly admires Fairy Sway's elegance, as his disciple, I had to do something. I told the painter about Fairy Sway's celestial appearance and asked him to draw a freehand painting. Zheng Dafeng was gratified. This disciple had finished his apprenticeship. At some point, Sui Yuyu was standing at the door, his face full of mockery. This painter from the Fan family is truly a master painter. With just a few words from Sir Fan, he could draw so vividly. Jin Su, who had been silent all this time, frowned. Although she didn't have any romantic feelings for Fan was still the best candidate for the future head of the Fan family. Osmanthus Island was already under Fan's name. According to Chen Pinggan, this female warrior with a sword was one of his retainers. To put it nicely, she was a guest of the family, but to put it bluntly, she was a retainer. However, the situation in Old Dragon City was changing, and Aunt Gui had warned her to be careful with her words and actions. Although Sui Yuyu was disrespectful to Fan Jin Su was somewhat dissatisfied, but she still didn't say anything. Today was the New Year's greeting, and she had no right to speak. Jin Su was well aware of this, even if she was the only disciple of Madame Gui, one of Old Dragon City's Earth Immortals. Jin Su's attention was still on Chen Pinggan. A scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at with new eyes. This fellow was no longer the young man who loved to drink. His earthy and childish air had faded away, and in its place was a kind of calmness. His hair was tied up with a white jade hairpin, and he wore a snow-white robe. A familiar red wine flask hung at his waist. He was much taller, and he sat upright. When talking to others, he liked to look them in the eye, and his eyes would carry a sincere smile that wasn't perfunctory at all. Then Jin Su noticed a small piece of charcoal next to Chen Pinggan. This skinny little girl's eyes were huge, and they spun around quickly. She sneaked glances at Jin Su, and her master, Madame Gui. Jin Su smiled at her. Pei Qian grinned back at her. In Pei Qian's eyes, these beautiful sisters, from Yaro Jinji to Sui Yuyu to the one in front of him, were all big money bags. He heard from Zheng Dafeng that there was a little thing in the world called the money-moving ghost. It was one of the charming ghosts, and Pei Qian felt that it was quite similar to himself. As expected, Jin Su came in a hurry and didn't bring any New Year's money. She also didn't expect to meet such a little girl, but Madame Gui had already prepared an exquisitely embroidered small sachet. At first glance, it was obvious that it wasn't simple. The sachet itself exuded wisps of snow-white spiritual energy, and it also exuded bits and pieces of tender green radiance, fragrant and pleasant. Chen Pinggan roughly guessed that it was the natal Osmanthus leaf of the ancestral Osmanthus tree on Osmanthus Island, so he didn't dare to accept it. Pei Qian's observation skills weren't bad, and when he saw that Chen Pinggan wasn't willing to accept this New Year's money, he could only laugh foolishly and shake his head. Madame Gui insisted on giving a meeting gift to Pei Qian, and Chen Pinggan couldn't dissuade her, so he could only let Pei Qian accept it. Naturally, he would keep it for him. Pei Qian didn't need Chen Pinggan to say anything. He respectfully accepted the sachet with both hands and bowed to express his thanks. He even started to say some pleasing words, such as wishing Madame Gui good fortune, good health, and eternal youth. Madame Gui was quite pleased when she heard it, and she rubbed Pei Qian's head, saying that his master Chen Pingan already had a house on Osmanthus Island under his name, and there was also a small house on the ferry called Toad Hall, so he might as well give it to him. Pei Qian's eyes widened. He was really shocked. What? All the madams in the world were so generous when giving gifts? Giving a house as soon as they met? Could it be that all the women in the world became more generous when they got older? Chen Pingan smiled bitterly. Aunt Gui, you really can't accept this house, you can't. Madame Gui stared at him. What does me giving Pei Qian a house have to do with you? Chen Pingan coughed. Pei Qian. Pei Qian immediately straightened his back and said in a childish voice, a master for a day is a father for life. I don't dare to go against my master's orders, or else I would be unfilial. Madame Gui felt that it was interesting, and she glanced at Chen Pingan, smiled and asked, you taught her? Chen Pingan was ashamed. I probably taught her to read and copy every day, so she taught herself from the books, right? Pei Qian flattered, it's master who taught her well. Chen Pingan smiled and knocked Pei Qian's head. Pei Qian hugged his head, feeling wronged and confused. After sending Madame Gui and her group off, Chen Pingan and the old Aurus core sword cultivator, Ma Ji, walked side by side on their last journey. Chen Pingan asked the Fan family for some advice on sword nurturing and sword refining techniques, and Ma Ji naturally answered honestly. 9th day of the first month. Old Dragon City had a custom, which was called the birth of the Heavenly Duke. Every family had to prepare candles and vegetarian dishes, and pray to the heavens in the courtyards, and alleys. However, there were no people from Old Dragon City in the Dusty Medicine Shop, but Zheng Dafeng was even more particular than the people of Old Dragon City. He was a man who did not care much about the new year, but he personally prepared candles and fruits, as well as vegetarian dishes, and set up 3 incense tables in the courtyard. Finally, he lit 3 incense sticks and bowed 3 times and 9 times. Such a ceremony was smaller than when the monarch of a dynasty worshipped the heavens, but it was much bigger than when the people worshipped the heavens. The yin spirit of the Zhao family was even more respectful. It did not burn any incense, but it was meticulous in kneeling and bowing. Pei Qian squatted under the eaves and watched with great interest, but Chen Pingan did not look much. In fact, this was already related to the secret of Zheng Dafeng and the yin spirit, but Zheng Dafeng did not hide it, so Chen Pingan pretended that he did not see it. He went to the counter and continued to be the temporary shopkeeper and accountant. Chen Pingan was ready to go to the Sea of Clouds to officially refine the water seal. As for which half-immortal weapon Fu Li would take out, it was worth looking forward to. After all, this time it was Du Maro and the Tongyi sect who implicated Emperor Dali. The latter was ambitious to go north of Old Dragon City, so he would not take the initiative to provoke Chen Pingan and Zheng Dafeng. It was just that the Dali dynasty obviously underestimated the cost of an ascendant cultivator and the reward that he needed to pay to leave the mountain illegally. Therefore, no matter how much gold and copper coins Emperor Dali gave, Chen Pingan would only take too little. The bag of gold and copper coins that Zheng Dafeng gave at the beginning had all been eaten by the golden Li robe. The golden dragon embroidered in the middle of the robe and the pearl of unknown material contained more and more Reiki. Not only was it repaired, but the quality of the robe was also improved. According to the yin spirit of the Zhao family, as long as it kept eating the gold and copper coins, this golden Li robe would definitely become a half-immortal weapon robe. Chen Pingan was not very happy. On one hand, he felt sorry for the hard-earned gold and copper coins. On the other hand, Zheng Dafeng had already said that once a martial artist entered the 3 realms of spirit refining, golden body, long travel, and the top of the mountain, the worldly possessions of the immortals on the mountain would become more and more useless and even become a burden. On the 10th day of the first lunar month, in Old Dragon City, there was also a local folk named Immovable Rock and the story of a mouse marrying a girl. Although Pei Qian was very afraid of ghosts, she liked to listen to these stories the most. Pei Qian had learned to copy books early every day and no longer dawdled until bedtime. This probably had something to do with Chen Pingan watching her copy books every day. Today, when she was taking a break while copying books, Pei Qian suddenly asked Chen Pingan a question. In the book, it was advised not to eat the march fish and advised not to hit the 3 spring bird. Then, would it be impossible to fish in the spring? Chen Pinggan did not give an answer at that time. He smiled and let Pei Qian finish copying the book first. When Pei Qian finished writing the last word, Chen Pinggan, who had been silently thinking for a long time, told Pei Qian that this was a very good sentence to persuade people to do good. However, when a person still needed to work hard to survive, he could not care about this and should not care about this. However, when a person did not have to worry about food and clothing and believed in Buddha, with this kind of compassionate heart, he could do it. However, if you saw other people catching fish and birds to fill their stomachs when they were hungry in the spring, it would be wrong to go and tell them about this principle. If you did not even have compassion for people, how could you have compassion for the evils of the world? Therefore, in the end, the principle was still the same, but the priority was different. Pei Qian nodded and said that she understood. Chen Pinggan smiled and said, "If you don't understand, then you don't understand. Remember it in your heart and slowly think about it." Pei Qian laughed and said, "I was lying just now. Actually, I still don't understand." Therefore, in the first month of the lunar year, Pei Qian ate another chestnut. On this day, in the dusty medicine shop, the clouds were still light and the wind was blowing. Pei Qian was watching Chen Pinggan practice the six-step stance in the courtyard. Chen Pinggan suddenly stopped and called Pei Qian to the front of the shop. He also asked Yin Master Zhao to help isolate a small space. Only then did he start to teach Pei Qian the incantation of the 18 stops sword qi, the circulation path, and the most exquisite rapid and slow transition. Then, he took out a piece of paper. Chen Pinggan drew the names of the human body's qi fu acupoints on it and guided Pei Qian one by one. This was the incantation of the sword qi that Alliance had modified. Among the young sword cultivators at the Great Wall of Sword Qi, only a small group of people, including Ning Yaro, learned the 18-stop sword qi that Alliance had modified and perfected. Since Pei Qian could not bear the hardships of practicing martial arts, he wanted to see if she could walk down this path where the body could not bear the hardships and only depended on the talent of the sword. As for how far she could walk, Chen Pinggan did not have any extravagant hopes. Pei Qian's memory was good, even better than Chen Pinggan's. This was something that the four people in the painting had already experienced. Therefore, after Chen Pinggan taught her twice and told her all the precautions, he let Pei Qian take the painting and study it by herself. At dusk that day, Pei Qian guiltily found Chen Pinggan and said that she was indeed a little stupid. She had practiced for so long and only reached the third stop of the sword qi. She could not go any further. Chen Pinggan gave her another chestnut and scolded her with a straight face. "Learn one thing. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Be down to earth." Pei Qian responded with an "oh" and ran back to her room to continue playing with fire. She was already able to grasp the direction of the small stream of fire. It would go wherever she wanted it to go. It ran very fast in those so-called acupoints and meridians, and it was very obedient. She couldn't reach the fourth stop for the time being, but if she didn't want to stay here, she would find another place to stay. Then, she could just go somewhere else to play. She did not know that Chen Pinggan was in the shop in front of her. She was alone and nagged for a long time. On the 11th day of the first month, a travel-worn rare guest came to the dusty medicine shop. It was Huang Ting of Mount Taiping. However, when she saw a certain old man squatting at the door and eating melon seeds with two wanderers, she was stunned on the spot. The old man blinked at her with all his might. Huang Ting reached out and rubbed her eyebrows. "You're the old master of the immortal realm of the Jade Gui sect. Why are you here?" Huang Ting could only pretend that she did not know this old man. In terms of seniority, the old man squatting at the door was half a level higher than the old Lord of Heaven of Mount Taiping. He was about the same seniority as Du Maro of the Ascendant Realm of the Tongyi sect. In terms of cultivation, now that Du Mao's body was gone and his great Tao had collapsed, it was hard to say whether his soul was left. The old man in front of her was the most powerful immortal realm in the Tongyi continent. The Jade Gui sect did nothing and inexplicably became the most powerful immortal realm in the Tongyi continent. The old man's status rose even more. He was really an old man who knew how to lie down and enjoy life. Huang Ting's impression of this senior on the mountain was not bad, but it was not very good either. After all, their temperaments were worlds apart. Seeing the surprised Chen Pinggan, Huang Ting said straightforwardly, with some clues and some intuition, I have already found an ancient side palace in the depths of the earth vein. Following the route, I stood on the locking dragon platform, but I still could not find the old bastard who deceived his master and killed his ancestors. It was as if he had completely disappeared from the vast world. Later, the master of the sect sent me a message by flying sword, saying that there was no need to look for him. I hurriedly returned to the sect, and then received the Ancestral Hall's direct inheritance jade token that you mentioned. The old Lord of Heaven, the Dafu Academy, and a yin-yang cultivator concluded that the chaos in the central part of the Tongyi continent this time was caused by the Yuanying cultivator of the Taiping Mountain who died with the Taoist crown. Our Taiping Mountain was naturally ashamed. The old Lord of Heaven was too ashamed to see anyone, so he asked me to come to Old Dragon City, hoping to find you in time. There was nothing else, just an apology. After all, the vitality of Taiping Mountain has been greatly damaged, and we really don't have the ability to puff ourselves up at our own cost. Well, actually, the old Lord of Heaven wanted to give some compensation, but he stopped me. Chen Pinggan, if you want to scold me, don't blame Taiping Mountain for not upholding justice and being petty. If it was in the past, this would not be the style of doing things. When Huang Ting said this, there was a rare bitterness in her voice. She said, the demons in the well prison fled everywhere, and my fellow sect members went down the mountain to eliminate the demons. This battle was really too tragic. Chen Pinggan's heart was heavy. He nodded and said, I think so. Huang Ting suddenly laughed and said, Tongyi Ju can be considered to have 8 lifetimes of bad luck. He provoked a sword immortal and cut off Du Mao's path of ascension. After a few days of peace, a 10th realm martial artist fought his way from the foot of the mountain all the way to the peak of the ancestral master mountain. He tore down their ancestral master hall. From beginning to end, other than the attacks of a few unpolished jade cultivators from the Jade sect, which he slightly dodged, the rest of the cultivators of the middle 5 realms all stood still. They were casually thrown at him like tickles. I was quite amused watching this. Jiang Shangzhen from the Jade sect was even happier. He directly got a pavilion ferry and suspended it above the Tongyi sect. He set up a grand banquet and entertained guests from all over with great hospitality. Chen Pinggan hurriedly drank a mouthful of wine to calm his nerves. On the side, Zheng Dafeng, Zhu Lian, and the foreign old man listened to this news. Their eyes secretly glanced at Huang Ting. In terms of looks, Huang Ting, who returned to the world with the appearance of a banished immortal from the Lotus Blossom Blessed Land, was more outstanding than Sui Yuyu, Fan Junmaro, and Jin Su. Chen Pinggan asked Huang Ting about her future plans. She said that she originally wanted to travel to the central divine continent, but the old Heaven Lord did not agree. He said that if she dared to go, he would dare to hang himself. She only needed to choose between the Aquarius continent and the North continent. Huang Ting did not mince her words. She told Chen Pinggan that she felt that the Aquarius continent was too small. The North continent was filled with sword cultivators. She could go there to sharpen her sword. She might be able to reach the Jade unpolished realm. She could not let a sword cultivator from a small place like the Aquarius continent embarrass all the sword cultivators of the Tongyi continent. Huang Ting was swift and decisive. After finishing the discussion, she prepared to fly on her sword to the north. However, when Huang Ting accidentally saw Pei Qian practicing her peerless swordsmanship in the courtyard, he thought about how he still owed Chen Pinggan and couldn't help but feel unhappy. After learning that Pei Qian was Chen Pinggan's first disciple, he asked the little girl if she wanted to learn the fastest swordsmanship and saber techniques in Tongyejo. Pei Qian asked if it hurt. Huang Ting laughed and said it did not hurt. Pei Qian turned to look at Chen Pinggan. The latter smiled and nodded. Huang Ting stayed for one more day and taught Pei Qian a set of sword technique and saber technique. White ape back sword technique, white ape dragging saber technique. Before he left, Huang Ting patted Pei Qian's little head, then stretched out his fingers to pinch Charcoal's cheeks. He shook his head and said regretfully, "What a smart child, why is she so ugly?" In the end, Pei Qian was heartbroken. She was unhappy the whole day. Was it because of that yellow paper talisman? Her forehead was still listless. Chen Pingan looked at Pei Qian and thought of the little girl in the red cotton-padded jacket who liked to call him Little Martial Uncle. In the eyes of everyone in the Cliff Academy, that little girl in the red cotton-padded jacket was a little strange. She was always in a hurry by herself and liked to carry a small bamboo box. She went to the academy alone and left alone. She climbed mountains, trees, roofs, up and down. Otherwise, she would squat by the lake and stare at the fish, watching them swim around with their tails wagging. Whenever she had the chance, she would leave the academy and wander around the streets of the capital. The little girl was always alone inside and outside the academy. People who looked at her for a long time felt a little lonely. However, although it was strange, the little girl's etiquette was good enough. As long as she saw the teachers and teachers of the academy on the way, she would always stop abruptly, salute and greet them, and then run away as fast as lightning. In the beginning, the teachers would still stop and smile and say a few words of advice. But the red figure was already gone. Later, they got used to it and smiled in response. In the end, they would shake their heads with a smile and continue walking without stopping. Li Baoping felt that she was doing okay in the Cliff Academy. Although she rarely saw Li Huai and Lin Shuyi, and she rarely saw Yu Lu and Xie Xie. Even if she saw them, there was nothing to talk about. She didn't think much of these things after talking to Kui Dongshan on the tree branch on the mountain peak. They didn't miss her little martial uncle that much anymore. It didn't matter. She would just make up for their share. She would think more about her little martial uncle. Just like that, the days passed one by one. After the new year, even the first month of the lunar calendar was almost over. Soon, it would be the Lantern Festival with big red lanterns hanging high. The little girl was a little homesick. Her parents, her grandfather, her eldest brother and second brother. And of course, her little martial uncle. Little martial uncle hadn't sent a letter to the academy for a long time. This made Li Baoping a little sad. 372. It was the Lantern Festival on the 15th day of the first lunar month. Every household in Old Dragon City was decorated with lanterns and streamers. The streets and alleys were crowded with tourists. According to the customs, each of the 5 major surnames created a long dragon of lanterns to parade through the streets. If one were to look down from the sea of clouds at the richest city in the Aquarius continent, one would discover that there were 5 fire dragons roaming along a fixed route. Chen Pingan asked the 4 of them to bring Pei Qian out to enjoy the lanterns. The yin spirit surnamed Zhao followed them secretly in case of any accidents. He and Zheng Dafeng guarded the shop. The 2 of them stood at the counter. There was a pot of wine, 2 small white porcelain wine cups that were as thin as wings, and a few dishes to accompany the wine. They drank, ate, and chatted. Zheng Dafeng always had some strange rules. Before drinking, he found a willow branch from somewhere and stuck it beside the dusty door of the medicine shop. He even placed a pair of bowls and chopsticks outside the door. Chen Pingan glanced at the door and asked, "Is it to worship the gods and Buddha or to entertain the wandering ghosts that pass by?" Zheng Dafeng smiled and said, "It's just something that the old man passed down. The old man has never explained the specific rules. As his disciples, we can only follow his instructions. There are no demons or ghosts in Old Dragon City. With so many Qi refinement warriors gathered together, the yang energy is too strong. Even if there are a few kittens and puppies, with old Zhao, the yin spirit in the medicine shop, they would not dare to come over. Ghosts and otherworldly items, not to mention those malicious ghosts who have lost their minds, most of us know more about rules and etiquette." Chen Pingan nodded and took a sip of wine. It was the Osmanthus wine sent by the Fan family. He suddenly said, "I plan to ask Fan Junmaro for help tomorrow to refine my first natal item by the Sea of Clouds. If it succeeds, I will leave Old Dragon City and head north. Although Old Master Sheng said that I can go anywhere in the future without any taboos, I thought about it. Anyway, there is nothing important that I have to do now. I will still follow old Senior Yang's original plan and not return to Longquan County for the time being. I will probably go to 3 or 4 places in the Aquarius continent. I estimate that it will take me more than a year to travel. After I finish my tour, I can almost go back. Zheng Dafeng leaned against the counter and looked at the small alley outside the door. He casually asked, "Have you ever thought of establishing a sect in Longquan County?" Chen Pinggan shook his head and said, "Just by looking at Master Wan's behavior, you can roughly guess how troublesome it is. It's difficult. Furthermore, I don't have the qualifications to establish a sect." Zheng Dafeng took a sip of the wine with an intoxicated look on his face. It was only half a cup of Osmanthus wine, but it seemed to have given him the intoxication of a few large jugs of fine wine. He chuckled and said, "If we can reclaim the mountains to the west of Longquan County one by one, we'll have over 10 connected mountains, and we'll have the foundation of natural energy to establish an immortal sect. However, it would not be easy for those forces to spit out the meat in their mouths. Previously, Dali only offered such a low price to make friends with the mountain immortals and the dynasty's tycoons. If it weren't for your relationship with Yuan Cheng, I'm afraid you wouldn't even be able to buy a Zhengzhou mountain, let alone Luorpa mountain." Chen Pinggan couldn't agree more. Although Black Pearl Grotto Heaven was not famous for its abundant natural energy, it was the opposite of the other 35 Grotto Heavens. 4 ordinary gold core and nascent soul earth immortals, it was a wonderful thing that they could only dream of if they could own a Luorpa mountain all by themselves. Chen Pinggan said that it was difficult to establish a sect, but deep in his heart, he really hoped that there would be such a day. Just like when he chatted with Lu Tai in the Eagle Castle, he had already thought about the people and things he should do in his own mountain. Otherwise, why would Chen Pinggan want to ask the old Taoist Lord of Heaven in Taiping Mountain how much it would cost to set up a mountain defense array? Zhong Kuei told him that the old Taoist Lord of Heaven was guarding Taiping Mountain, showed his golden body, held the bright moon mirror, and drove 3 swords to hunt down the white ape with a sword on his back thousands of miles away. How could Chen Pinggan not be fascinated? The old man who was familiar with the dusty medicine shop suddenly appeared, crossed the threshold with a smile, and said directly, "Chen Pinggan, it seems that you are about to leave Old Dragon City. I have something to discuss with you." Chen Pinggan stood up straight, put down the wine cup and chopsticks, and said with a smile, "Sir, please go ahead." The old man gestured for Chen Pinggan to continue drinking and eating. He walked to the counter, grabbed a few fried peanuts with his fingers, and put them in his mouth. After pondering for a moment, he said, "Maybe it's a little hard for you, and also a little offensive. But fate is unpredictable, like duckweed. If you miss it today, you may miss it forever. If you shrink back and stick your head out, you'll be stabbed. I'll just say it directly. After that, little brother Chen and brother Da Feng, don't make this old man unable to eat peanuts and sugar lotus slices in the future." Zheng Dafeng said angrily, "The 3 of us are open-minded people. Can't you say something straightforward?" The old man looked up, threw a piece of lotus root into his mouth and chewed. "Although Sui Yuyu is a pure martial arts master and reached the golden body state, in my opinion, the bottleneck is too big. It's extremely difficult to reach the top. At most, he'll be in the far travel state. If he's lucky, he'll only be a martial artist of the 8th state." Zheng Dafeng immediately said, "Only a martial artist of the 8th state? Old man, if you have the guts, go on the streets and shout these words. Let's see what the Earth Immortals in Old Dragon City think. Will they be so angry that they will slap your mouth?" The old man had a good temper and did not care about Zheng Dafeng's rebuttal. He smiled and said, "This is an exception. Actually, Sui Yuyu shouldn't have walked the path of martial arts." Zheng Dafeng slammed the table. "What did you say?" The old man quickly bent down and took Chen Pinggan's wine cup, filled it with Osmanthus wine, and raised it to Zheng Dafeng. "I said something wrong. I'll punish myself with 3 cups, 3 cups. He finished it in one gulp and was about to pour a second cup. Chen Pinggan smiled and reached out to cover the mouth of the wine pot. "Old mister, just drink a cup of wine as punishment. We're so familiar with each other, there's no need to be so formal." The old man resentfully put down the wine cup, wiped his mouth, and said regretfully, "This wine is good, but it's a pity that the taste is a bit bland. I can't taste it after 1 or 2 cups." Zheng Dafeng picked up a piece of shallot with tofu. "Brother Zun, if you have something to say, just say it." The old man surnamed Zun continued, Sui Yuyu is an extremely rare innate sword embryo. She has the disposition of a sword immortal. That's not all, but the key is that her sword heart is pure and clear. In the future, as a nascent soul sword cultivator, the possibility of breaking through the bottleneck of the fifth state will be greater. I don't mind saying this at the table. As long as little brother Chen is willing to part with his treasure and allow Sui Yuyu to join our sect, in 100 years, or at most 20 years, I guarantee that Sui Yuyu will become an extremely powerful nascent soul sword cultivator. Chen Pinggan smiled and did not say anything. He handed over the chopsticks and poured a cup of wine for the old man. Zheng Dafeng sneered, "Old man Zun, are you trying to swallow the sun and the moon like a toad? Aren't you afraid of bursting yourself?" Taking a step back, Sui Yuyu is already a golden body martial artist. You said it yourself that becoming a distant travel martial artist is not difficult. He just needs time to polish his body. You, on the other hand, want Sui Yu to give up all the things he has in his pocket for a Realm 8 martial artist. You want him to use up all his pure vital chi and spend another 100 or 200 years to pursue that illusory Realm 5 sword cultivator. The old man complained, "Didn't I say it earlier? It's a bit difficult, but Sui Yuyu has such an outstanding talent. If he doesn't turn to cultivate the way of the sword, it would be fine if I didn't see it. But now that I see it, I have to keep it in my stomach. It's really unbearable. I can't stand such a reckless waste of natural resources. Think about it, Sui Yuyu is such a pretty little girl. In the future, even if she becomes a martial artist in the distant travel realm, she'll still fight and kill with her fists. Punching and kicking, how much of a killjoy can she be? How can she compare to a female sword immortal with outstanding charm, her white clothes fluttering in the wind and her flying sword slashing enemies from 1,000 miles away?" Zhang Dafeng sneered, "It's easy to say. The higher the realm of a pure martial artist, the more dangerous it is to dissipate one's vital chi. This is especially true for the third realm of spirit refinement. It involves the primordial spirit and soul. If you're not careful, Sui Yuyu might lose half of her life, not to mention her innate sword embryo sword immortal potential. Old man Zun, do you think you're an ascendant realm cultivator or an immortal realm cultivator? Besides, why would Chen Pinggan give Sui Yuyu, such a beauty and half a personal maid, to an idle old pervert like you with both hands?" The old man said seriously, "I'm not vulgar. It's not for outsiders to know that. Brother Dafeng, you can humiliate me, but don't look down on yourself too." Zheng Dafeng gave the old man a thumbs up and picked up some food with his chopsticks. Brother's words are magnanimous. I can't find any flaws in them. The old man raised his cup and took a big gulp. Then he stroked his beard and smiled, "I know, Brother Dafeng. You're a famous person of my generation. At the crucial moment, your words are firm, reasonable, and righteous." Chen Pinggan picked up a peanut and chewed slowly. The old man did not dare to rush him. The success or failure of this matter would depend on the decision of this young man in front of him. Chen Pinggan thought for a while and said, "I can only help you ask Sui Yoyo's opinion." This time it was the old man's turn to be shocked. "Chen Pinggan, you're really agreeing?" Knowing that he had misspoken, the old man smiled awkwardly. Even the dumbest person in the world would know the value of a 8th realm far travel realm martial artist. Worth it. Even in the top few dynasties of the Aquarius continent, this was a transcendent existence that involved the martial fate of a country. The old man was actually very puzzled, but he still suppressed his words. The more he spoke, the more mistakes he would make. He did not want to waste his good karma. When the old man left the alley, Zheng Dafeng said that he wanted to take a breather and left with the old man. They went to the old locust tree outside the alley. During the Lantern Festival, regardless of wealth or status, the lanterns were as bright as day. The old man and Zheng Dafeng stood under the tree and asked, "Why didn't Chen Pinggan ask about my true identity and the more important reward?" Zheng Dafeng thought for a while, probably only after Sui Yuyu agrees will he ask about this. The old man mocked himself. "It seems like you and I are still somewhat stingy with money. Chen Pinggan is the one who is particular." Zheng Dafeng bent down and looked at the bustling street. He said indifferently, "Particular people are easily taken advantage of." The old man also retracted his expression. His eyes were still and deep. F***K, being taken advantage of is a blessing. After a moment of silence, the old man surnamed Zun asked, Brother Dafeng, where are you going? Zheng Dafeng said, I'm a useless person now. I want to return to my old profession and be a gatekeeper. The old man asked, do you want to come to my mountain? I don't dare to say that I'll be an immortal, but I won't be lacking in wine, meat, and beauties. I believe you know my temper. I'll look for you to chat and spar with you. Zheng Dafeng shook his head and said, I don't want to owe you a favor. I also don't have the heart to go to your mountain and use your power to intimidate others. The old man patted Zheng Dafeng's shoulder. Think on the bright side. There's no obstacle in life that cannot be overcome. Zheng Dafeng laughed. You're a level 5 Qi refinement warrior and you still have the cheek to ask a useless person like me to think on the bright side. Don't you feel embarrassed? The old man sighed. I didn't expect Brother Dafeng to see the demeanor of a level 5 immortal with just one look. It seems that the description of women who are born beautiful and unable to give up on themselves is also applicable to me. Zheng Dafeng turned to look at the old man who had a serious look on his face. You've been cultivating in the sect for so many years. Do people often want to practice with you? The old man shook his head and said, Never. When I was young, I relied on my handsome looks and was very popular among my senior and junior sisters. Once I was in trouble, they would fight to help me settle it. After the new year, I suddenly realized that it was not good to mingle with girls every day. I picked up the matter of cultivation again and made rapid progress. Therefore, the elders in the sect did not care about me. When I'm old, I'm even more respected. Zheng Dafeng patted the old man's shoulder. Brother Zun, luckily you didn't grow up in our hometown. Otherwise, there would be many people teaching you how to be a proper person. The old man smiled and did not comment. He muttered to himself, if people respect me, I'll respect them tenfold. If Sui Yuyu is really willing to join our sect, then I'll have to think carefully about what kind of gift I should give her to enter the ancestral hall and how to repay Chen Pingan for letting her go. Zheng Dafeng joked, if you have the ability, then give Sui Yuyu an immortal weapon. The old man chuckled, that won't do. At least before Sui Yuyu becomes a sword cultivator in the pure jade realm, I will definitely not give her this coffin. Moreover, when the time comes, she will have to promise to protect the sect for at least 300 years. Otherwise, I won't be willing. Zheng Dafeng turned to look. The old man exchanged glances with him and said confidently, What? Is bragging illegal? It was already very late when Pei Qian and the rest returned to the medicine shop. Chen Pingan had been waiting at the door. He called Sui Yuyu and said that he had something to discuss. The two of them walked slowly in the small alley. Chen Pingan then told Sui Yuyu about how the old man wanted Sui Yuyu to go to the mountain where he lived to cultivate. Sui Yuyu was expressionless. She asked Chen Pingan if he knew the background of that person, what his name was, how high his cultivation was, and where his sect was. Chen Pingan said that he had to ask for Sui Yoyo's opinion before he could talk about it. After he got the answer, he would even send a flying sword message to Taiping Mountain to ask the old Lord of Heaven to personally verify it. When he was sure that there was nothing wrong, he would let Sui Yuyu make the final decision. Sui Yuyu was silent. Chen Pingan could only accompany her out of the small alley and walk on the deserted street. Sui Yuyu died twice in the battle of the ruined temple. Outside Old Dragon City, she exchanged her life with a golden core cultivator. After 3 times, her martial arts path would stop at the 8th far travel realm. Sui Yuyu suddenly stopped and asked, Do you really want me to go to that person's mountain? At least I can earn 1 or 2 magic weapons and build a relationship with the old man's sect. Chen Pingan laughed and shook his head. If it weren't for the fact that I have no other choice, of course I would want you to stay by my side. I hope that I can help you to disperse your pure qi and turn to sword cultivation to become a qi cultivator. You can go higher and farther on the path of cultivation. But you should know that I'm only a martial artist of the 5 states. The reconstruction of the longevity bridge has just begun. The current foundation of the celestial family with thousands of years of history is not enough. And on the path of cultivation, one slow step will lead to another. Sui Yuyu asked again, if I choose to leave, How will you deal with the painting that concerns my life? Chen Pinggan said without hesitation, of course I'll hide it well. When it comes to cultivation, it's hard to predict the ups and downs of people's hearts. If you stay with me, at least I won't harm you and won't use it to threaten you. On this point, whether you believe me or not, I think so. But if I hand it to someone else, I won't be at ease. Even if that old man treats you sincerely and is willing to accept you as his direct disciple and let you enter his sect's ancestral hall, how can I guarantee that others won't have evil intentions towards you? They won't hope to restrain you and force you into a dangerous situation at some critical juncture. A person in a high position has no choice. But I, Chen Pinggan, am different. It's not that I'm kinder and treat you better, but at least I won't treat you as a commodity. No one will pay a sky-high price to buy you. Sui Yuyu stared at Chen Pinggan. Chen Pinggan looked at him calmly. Truth. Sui Yuyu didn't say yes or no. Instead, he inexplicably changed the topic. That female Taoist nun of Mount Taiping is really beautiful. She's also a nascent soul sword cultivator. Chen Pinggan asked strangely, and then? Sui Yuyu asked, you're not moved at all? Chen Pinggan rolled his eyes and held the back of his head with his hands. He walked leisurely. There are so many beautiful women in the world. If they're beautiful, I'll look at them a few more times. They're pleasing to the eye. It's human nature. But why would I be moved? Sui Yuyu laughed for the first time. As a man, you don't even have the thought of hugging a woman. Are you, Chen Pinggan, sick? Chen Pinggan still held the back of his head and turned his neck. Languid, he said, don't scold me. They walked back to the dusty drugstore in silence. Pei Qian, who was still awake, held a mountain walking stick at the door of the drugstore. She said that she wanted to show off her skills to Chen Pinggan. She vowed that after Old Wei and Little White saw her swordsmanship and knife skills, they said that they were superb. As for the white ape-back swordsmanship and dragging knife style that Huang Ting taught Pei Qian, the four people in the painting pretended that they didn't know. They wouldn't steal it and secretly tempt Pei Qian to tell them the formula. On the one hand, he had to talk about the righteousness of Jiang Hu. On the other hand, Pei Qian, that clever little girl, would definitely agree and then turn around to sell them out to Chen Pinggan. Chen Pinggan would not be easy to talk to about this kind of thing. The four people, including Sui Yuyu and Zhu Lian, didn't dare to test Chen Pinggan's bottom line with this kind of thing. Therefore, Sui Yuyu walked into the drugstore and went to the backyard to practice the sword furnace stance that Chen Pinggan tacitly allowed. In the alley, Chen Pinggan stood at the door and smiled. Give it a try. Pei Qian nodded with a straight face. With a light shout, she took a step forward, holding the mountain walking stick with both hands and waving it with the dragging knife style. Pei Qian didn't control her strength well, so the mountain walking stick flew out of her hand. Chen Pinggan reached out and grabbed the bamboo stick that almost hit the wall of the alley. Otherwise, it would have been destroyed. Pei Qian was dumbfounded. It was over. He felt that he was definitely going to eat chestnuts. She didn't expect that Chen Pinggan just returned the mountain walking stick to her and smiled. Your momentum is quite strong. In the future, you should obediently practice the 6-step stance with me. Otherwise, no matter how good your swordsmanship and knife skills are, your body won't be able to support it. You will only make a fool of yourself. Pei Qian stomped her foot in annoyance and lamented endlessly. If she knew this would happen, she wouldn't have shown off her peerless martial arts. In the future, she would have to walk according to the boxing stance. Wasn't she asking for trouble? Chen Pinggan patted her little head. When you are young, you will have to endure more hardships. Pei Qian raised her head with a face full of expectation. When I grow up, I can enjoy life every day. Lying down and receiving money. I don't have to copy books anymore. If I want to drink, I can eat whatever I want. Chen Pinggan brought her back to the drugstore and closed the door. He smiled. When you grow up, you will naturally know. Pei Qian's head drooped. I don't really want to grow up. That female Taoist priest said that I'm not handsome, so I guess I won't look any better when I grow up. I'm still young, and I'm just an ugly girl. Later, it was Sui Yuyu who was the kindest and told me the truth. It turned out that Zhu Lian was beating around the bush. He said that not only would I look scary when I grow up, I would also scare ghosts. Zhu Lian is too mean. I can't believe I always eat half a bowl of extra rice every time I eat. I'm the most supportive of Zhu Lian's dishes. Zhu Lian really has no conscience. Chen Pinggan had a smile in his eyes. He deliberately used her catchphrase to tease the little girl. You're worried. Pei Qian's face was full of smiles. With the temperament of a child, she ran away with a stomach full of worries. After returning to the side room and closing the door, she sat opposite Sui Yuyu. She rested her chin on her hands and stared at Sui Yuyu, who was practicing the sword furnace stance. She softly asked, Sister Sui, why are you so beautiful? Can you teach me? Sui Yuyu opened her eyes. She seemed to be in a good mood today. Holding back her laughter, she deliberately put on a serious face and said, learning how to read, copying books and practicing words, 6-step stance, sword furnace stance, sword technique, blade technique, wiping the table and sweeping the floor, serving tea and water, you have to be serious. Pei Qian slightly tilted her head and grinned, Sister Sui, you really like to joke. Sui Yuyu nodded her head and imitated the tone of a female Taoist priest, Huang Ting. She clicked her tongue and said, what a smart child. Why are you so ugly? Pei Qian sullenly turned around and leaned against the table. She placed her head on the table and took out her most precious yellow paper talisman. She stuck it on her forehead and softly said, Sister Sui, do you like my father? Sui Yuyu was speechless. Pei Qian clearly did not care about the answer. She continued, previously we saw so many lanterns and they were all beautiful. But do you still remember the lantern festival beside the Immortal Phoenix restaurant? There were things like boiling oil, pulling out tongues, skinning and pulling tendons. It was not a servant or a malicious spirit but a torture device from hell. Old Wei said that it might be a lantern festival arranged by the penal office to deal with people who like to do bad things. I was scared to death. You don't know. When I suddenly realized that my father was not by my side, I was about to cry. Sui Yuyu had already closed her eyes again. She continued to practice the sword furnace stance, widening her meridians and nourishing her body. Pei Qian stretched out her hand and carefully straightened the yellow paper talisman. She muttered, the talisman protects Pei Qian well. Demons and ghosts, go away. On this night, the yin spirit with the surname Zhao found Chen Pinggan, who was sleeping on the floor. He said that the old man wanted him to pass on a message again. The Tongyi sect had officially given the compensation. The golden elixir of the 12th level great demon had already been refined in the small cave of Wutong by Du Maro, who had lost his mind for the sake of immortal ascension. Therefore, he used 2 pieces of 5-colored glass in exchange. They were as small as a thumb and as big as a fist. After the soul of a 12th level great cultivator decayed or disintegrated, it was possible that an immortal's remains would appear. Legend has it that after a great cultivator of the immortal ascension realm failed, there would be pieces of 5-colored glass-like golden body. This was the only thing that reduced the anger of the Tongyi sect slightly after Du Maro destroyed the cave of Wutong, regardless of the life and death of the disciples of the sect. After Du Maro knew that he had failed to immortal ascension, at the last moment, he controlled the pieces of glass that fell in all directions. 3 of them returned to the ancestor mountain of the Tongyi sect. Only 1 piece was left in the ancestor hall of the Tongyi sect, and the other 2 pieces were taken out. After the yin spirit with the surname Zhao explained this important matter, he carefully handed Chen Pinggan a palm-sized yellowish Wutong leaf. He said that this was something that the Tongyi sect had taken out together. The pieces of glass after the immortal ascension realm failed to pass the tribulation were placed inside. In addition, the old man also specially prepared 2 sets of mountain guarding formation for Chen Pinggan. 1 set was an imitation of the offensive sword formation of Taiping Mountain, and the other set was an imitation of the mountain guarding formation of the Fuyao sect. The immortal money needed to hire the Mohist masters to build the formation was paid by the Tongyi sect. It was all Guyu money, and they were all placed in the Wutong leaf. However, the pivotal magic treasures of the 2 formations, such as the flying sword and the golden puppet, still needed Chen Pinggan to find them by himself. In the future, Whether he could buy them with money or by chance depended on whether he was fated to find them. Finally, the yin spirit said, "You must carry the wutong leaf with you," but the old man also said that it's best to wait until you return to your hometown town before looking at the various objects inside. Otherwise, once you open the close object, it's equivalent to opening the door of the small cave for a short time, and it's easy to leak the secrets inside. After all, the pieces of glass of the immortal Ascension Realm cultivators are too rare. Any cultivator of the 5 realms will covet it. The old man also asked me to pass on one thing. The golden wine robe is a half-immortal weapon. It won't be a loss. Chen Pinggan put away the wutong leaf. After Yin Spirit Zhao finished speaking, his figure dissipated. He helped the old man twice and also gained a lot. Chen Pinggan lay back on the floor, touched the white jade hairpin on his head, and closed his eyes to sleep. The next morning, when the sky was slightly bright, Fan Junmao arrived as promised and took Chen Pinggan to the sea of clouds in the sky above Old Dragon City. The old man surnamed Zun had been waiting outside the shop for a long time. Before Chen Pinggan said anything, Sui Yuyu opened the curtain and chatted with the old man outside the door. Sui Yuyu walked back to the backyard. The old man stroked his beard and nodded with a smile. Although it was not the best result, it was not bad. He just had to wait for a few more years. At that time, Yugue sect would have another nascent soul realm sword cultivator who had a chance to reach the 5 realms within 100 years. Well, when the time came, he would personally take her to Tongye sect and pay a visit to see if she could contribute to the rebuilding of the ancestral hall of his brother sect. Cultivators had to be kind. The sun rose from the east, and the rays of light were boundless. The top of the sea of clouds was beautiful. When the time came, heaven and earth would work together. The water word seal that Chen Pinggan refined this time was his first life item. Apart from the fact that it took an entire 10 years, there weren't many flaws. A mural appeared on the wall of Chen Pinggan's Xiantian pellet chamber. A river was like a white silk, filled with mist, slowly flowing. At the moment of success, the golden necklace robe on his body became light. Even if Chen Pinggan let go of his courage and loosened the golden necklace restriction, allowing the spiritual qi in the sea of clouds to flow back into his acupoints, it would automatically flow into a lake inside his acupoints. Only at this moment did the pure martial qi that was constantly being eaten away completely break free of its shackles. As if it had been granted amnesty, it crazily wandered around the small world of the human body. Chen Pinggan slightly controlled it. The true qi in his body, the lake and the spiritual qi streams that flowed into the lake had more or less reached a state where they did not invade each other. Just like the officials of a country's imperial court, they could not be said to be complementing each other, nor could they be said to be fighting to the death. It was a peaceful coexistence. In the middle of the night, Chen Pinggan and Fan Junmao returned to the dusty medicine shop together, quietly. The 4 people in the mural opened and closed their eyes, and slowly fell asleep. The black smoke of Yin Master Zhao gradually disappeared into the wall. Zheng Dafeng and Pei Qian were sleeping soundly. Chen Pinggan sat on a long bench, and drank a mouthful of medicinal wine. Fan Junmao stood at the side, and asked, "If it was you, Chen Pinggan, would you take out the sea of clouds that accompanied you for countless years, and exchange it for the deity position of the southern mountain deity in the Aquarius continent?" Chen Pinggan said honestly, "I don't know." Fan Junmao, who was in a bad mood, said angrily, "Then what do you know?" Chen Pinggan laughed, "I know, but I don't know." Fan Junmao tossed Chen Pinggan a long sword that he had placed in the armory earlier. His face darkened as he flashed away. Early in the morning, Chen Pinggan and the rest left the dusty medicine shop, and went to the Immortal Ferry on the west side of Old Dragon City. They took a ferry, and set off towards Qingluan country, which was in the southeast territory of the Aquarius continent. Fan accompanied them to the ferry, and complained to Chen Pinggan that the next time they meet, he must not forget the porcelain and flower wine. Zheng Dafeng guarded the empty medicine shop alone, and looked at the Fu character pasted on the wall for a while. It was indeed much better than the Chun character. In the main hall, he walked around the table that was often filled with Zhu Lian's dishes, and finally sat on the threshold, and looked at the long bench opposite the courtyard. The long bench under the eaves, That young man sat on it the most, and Pei Qian occasionally sat there a few times. Over time, it seemed to have become a small territory of his. Zheng Dafeng puffed on his pipe. He scratched his head. All right, this time when he returned with his tail between his legs, he would definitely be scolded badly by the old man. On the ferry, Chen Pinggan once again carried a long sword on his back. The name of the sword was extremely interesting. Sword Immortal. End of chapter. 373. This ship to Qingluan was built by a Mohist mechanic. It was nothing out of the ordinary among the many ferries in Old Dragon City. Every time it carried 100 people, it was mostly transporting rare goods from the north of the Aquarius continent and the south of the Tongye continent. However, the goods that arrived in the hands of the merchants were the result of selection by the 5 major families in Old Dragon City. The quality of the goods was naturally average. Occasionally, they would pick up a few goods and earn a few hundred snow coins, which was already worth celebrating. Qingluan was a little famous in the southeast of the Aquarius continent. It was famous for its many Taoist temples and temples. Various Taoist immortals and virtuous monks often held water and land Taoist temples and Luotian grand ritual with the support of the imperial court. In addition, Qingluan's sandalwood paper was extremely famous and was sold to many continents. This made Qingluan one of the richest rulers in the southeast of the Aquarius continent. Moreover, Buddhism was not popular in the Aquarius continent. The number of temples in Qingluan was the highest in the continent. The sound of Sanskrit lingered in the air and the walls were filled with the beautiful works of sages, writers, and poets. In a brightly lit room on the top floor of the ferry, Chen Pinggan was reading a book about the landscape of Qingluan. He bought it from the bookstore in Old Dragon City and specially asked Zhu Lian to help him search for it. Chen Pinggan read while Pei Qian copied. The hardest thing in the world was at the beginning. After a long time, it would become a habit and it would not be difficult. Pei Qian was like that. Reading and copying became a daily habit. Even if Chen Pinggan did not urge her, she would still persevere. However, Chen Pinggan also knew that if he was not by her side for a long time, Pei Qian would definitely stop copying books. At most, she would feel guilty for 2 or 3 days and then she would go and play wildly. Chen Pinggan divided the pot of Old Dragon Gold Core Nascent Soul Stage medicinal wine into 5 portions and gave 1 portion to each of the 4 people in the painting. This was one of the few lucky things that could happen to pure martial artists who could rely on external help to cultivate. Sui Yuyu was now at the 7th realm, the Golden Body realm. She also had the Dharma sword Infatuation in her hands. Her killing power was actually not small, especially when it came to close combat. Qi cultivators below the Earth Immortal realm might not be her match once she got within 100 feet of them. The signs of Zhu Lian's bottleneck loosening were clear. Following closely behind Sui Yuyu, he was the second person to step into the 3 realms of martial arts. Wei Xian and Lu Baixiang did not have the possibility of breaking through for the time being. However, after Zheng Dafeng's feeding fist and the deathmatch outside Old Dragon City, they had pushed their peak realm 6 peak a little higher. The 4 people in the painting were not ordinary 7th realm and 6th realm martial artists. In this trip to the Aquarius continent, as long as they did not meet any crazy cultivators of the upper 5 realms, even if they faced a nascent Soul Earth Immortal who was not a sword cultivator, they would still have the power to fight. As long as Wei Xian and the other 3 did not hesitate to die, perhaps Chen Pinggan's side could still win. After the Battle of Old Dragon City, Chen Pinggan regretted the most was the green sword-suppressing talisman. Zhong Kuei wrote it with a small snow cone and gave it to Zheng Dafeng. Coincidentally, the sword that was trapped was the half-immortal weapon sword Immortal that Chen Pinggan was carrying on his back. Because the city lord of Old Dragon City, Fu Li, was not a sword cultivator and the sword was not a natal item, Zheng Dafeng used the sword-suppressing talisman to trap the sword. Even if it could not last for long, Fu Li admitted defeat. If he had a sword-suppressing talisman, Chen Pinggan would not have to be too afraid even if he met a nascent soul sword cultivator with murderous intent. Instead, he could catch them off guard and catch them off guard. However, these gains and losses were not to the extent that Chen Pinggan could not let go of them. What really made Chen Pinggan disappointed was this talisman. Was it the last 2 talismans that Zhong Kuei wrote in the world as a person of the Yang realm? One of them. Compared to the cross-continent ferries that Chen Pinggan had ridden and seen before, the ferry under his feet was really small. He could only stand at the window and admire the scenery. There was no viewing platform. After Pei Qian finished writing, Chen Pinggan carefully checked it and found that there were no careless words that needed to be rewritten. He then began to practice the 6-step stance with her, at least 4 hours a day. In the past, Chen Pinggan did not think that practicing the 6-step stance was boring and tiring. It was only after Pei Qian started practicing that he realized that although the mountain quaking fist stance was simple, it was not easy to practice it a million times. It was the same for both the body and mind. Even though Chen Pinggan paid attention to Pei Qian's shortness of breath and the excess of physical strength, Pei Qian was always so tired that she was drenched in sweat. The hair on her forehead was plastered together and her face was deathly pale. Although she did not dare to complain, Chen Pinggan watched from the side as her tanned little face lost its smile or her thin body involuntarily trembled when she walked step by step. Although Chen Pinggan was expressionless from beginning to end, he felt somewhat distressed when he saw her. On the first day, Pei Qian relied on the excitement of a newborn calf and endured 4 hours of 6-step stance. In the end, it was Chen Pinggan who carried her to the next room. On the second day, she fell to the ground after only 2 hours, cramping incessantly. Her entire body was drained of energy. Chen Pinggan did not insist on 4 hours. For the next few days, he guaranteed 2 hours of continuous 6-step stance, only a little longer each time. Only then did Pei Qian grit her teeth and persevere. In the beginning, little Charcoal still had the energy to glare at Zhu Lian when he was mocking her from the side. Later on, she really did not have the energy to fight for justice with Zhu Lian. 10 days later, after enduring the most arduous part of the journey, Pei Qian's face finally had a smile of the past. When she started walking, she once again began to swagger with Pei Qian's signature swagger. Otherwise, she would jump and skip. Zhu Lian would say something like, "Young master, this old servant personally believes that Pei Qian's martial arts aptitude is extremely good. When tempering her body, her muscles and bones should suffer more so that her blood and qi can flourish. There's no harm in practicing 6-step stance for 4 hours every day." Pei Qian could already continue to glare at him. On this day, after practicing the 6-step stance, 1 adult and 1 child opened the window and practiced the sword furnace stance. Pei Qian was short, so she could only face the wall and reflect. After Chen Pinggan agreed, she stepped onto a chair. It just so happened that she could overlook the sea of clouds outside the window with Chen Pinggan. Chen Pinggan said softly, "You have to believe that the hard times will end and the good times will come." Pei Qian was currently practicing the sword furnace stance, but it was just for show. The results were extremely small. Chen Pinggan was also a little puzzled. After asking Sui Yuyu and the others, he was unable to get an answer. After enduring another day of hardship, Pei Qian was secretly happy in her heart. She thought of something and turned her head with a face full of longing. "When I roam Jianghu in the future, can I also have a sword? It would be best if I could be like Xiao Bai and have a saber hanging from my waist. At that time, my strength would definitely increase by a lot. I wouldn't complain about having too much or being heavy." Chen Pinggan smiled and nodded. "As long as you don't slack off, when you roam Jianghu alone in the future, I can promise you right now that in the future, I will definitely give you a sword and a saber." Pei Qian was a little embarrassed and said in a small voice, "Actually, I've already thought about it. In the future, if I have my own saber and sword, I will hang them on the same side of my waist. This kind of sword and saber hanging posture, I even have a name for it. Master, do you want to hear it?" Chen Pinggan smiled. "Tell me about it. When it comes to naming things, I, Chen Pinggan, have always been very good at it. For example, the 1st and 15th day of the lunar month, or the exorcism of demons." Pei Qian whispered, "Let's call it saber and sword together because they are intertwined at the waist." "Master, what do you think?" Chen Pinggan smiled. "Pretty good." Pei Qian's eyes narrowed into crescents as he smiled. He stuck out 2 fingers and stuck them together. "With the sword that master is carrying, I am already very happy. Chen Pinggan leaned against the window and turned his head with a smile. When we return, the ferry will stop at the shore. We will still follow the old rules and travel Qing Luan on foot. When we see a bamboo forest by the side of the road, I will pick some older bamboo to make 2 bamboo sabers and bamboo swords for you. If you don't mind, you can hang them first. Pei Qian loudly said, make them lighter and smaller. It won't be heavy to hang them on my body. Chen Pinggan smiled and agreed. He looked at the sea of clouds and casually asked, then what about the mountain walking staff? Pei Qian said without hesitation, it is the number 1 general under my command. Alas, it has accompanied me for so long. I can't bear to just throw it away. I will allow it to retire and play with its grandchildren. When I return, I will ask old Wei what kind of official title should I give it. He dropped a large bag of acid-toothed books. However, Chen Pinggan nodded in approval and said softly, that's right. In Old Dragon City, at the Dusty Medicine Shop, Zheng Dafeng actually didn't have much luggage to pack. Other than some clothes, he only needed to bring the old tobacco pipe with him. It was as if this sloppy man, no matter if it was when he saw the broken wooden fence in Liju Grotto Heaven or when he came here, he had always been like this. There was nothing that he had to pick up and nothing that he couldn't put down. Tomorrow, he would take the Fu family's ferry back to the Dali dynasty's Longquan County. On the last day, Zheng Dafeng took a stool and sat under the old locust tree. The old man surnamed Zun had already left. He said that he was going to the invincible God Fist gang to meet a friend. Yesterday, Li had returned to Old Dragon City. Fu Li brought his eldest son Feng Donghai over. Fu Li's intentions were clear. Feng Donghai had acted on his own and caused this disaster. As long as Zheng Dafeng said something, he could let Mr. Li break Feng Donghai's longevity bridge. From then on, the Fu family would treat Feng Donghai as a useless person. Zheng Dafeng smiled and asked Fu Li why he didn't directly bring Feng Donghai, who had broken his longevity bridge, to the medicine shop. Fu Li was speechless. Feng Donghai was quite stubborn. Not only did he not beg for mercy, he even provoked him. If Li did not attack, he would feel uncomfortable. At that time, Zheng Dafeng's expression was tired as he sat in the courtyard and smoked. The old man had obviously made a deal with the Dali dynasty and the Fu and Fan families. That Fan Junmaro could become the second mountain god of the Dali dynasty after Wei Pai when the Song family cavalry stepped on the south coast of Old Dragon City. The price the old man paid was just Zheng Dafeng's Realm 9 cultivation. Zheng Dafeng knew that this matter was over. Zheng Dafeng thought about it and said that there was still a long way to go. Fu Li heaved a sigh of relief and was about to bring Feng Donghai back when Li punched him in the chest. Not only was the longevity bridge broken, but it was also so shattered that even gods could not save it. Li did not look at Feng Donghai and just stared at Fu Li calmly. I feel that as a father, I should stand up for my son. Fu Li helped his eldest son, Feng Donghai, up. There was no anger on his face as he smiled. You've finally let second Mr. Li vent his anger. This trip was worth it. Just like what Mr. Zheng said, there's still a long way to go. Oh. Li smiled and asked, why don't you lead the way to the Fu family ancestral hall? Fu Li's face instantly turned ashen. Zheng Dafeng said, Li that's enough. After Fu Li left with Feng Donghai, Li quickly left Old Dragon City. Today, under the locust tree, Zheng Dafeng was basking in the warm sun of early spring. He wore a comfortable jacket that Pei Qian and the others had bought for him. The girl that he had not seen in a long time probably ate well during the new year. Her face and body seemed to have become fuller. She did not just walk around in front of Zheng Dafeng like before. This time, she gathered her courage and approached Zheng Dafeng. She asked shyly, Shopkeeper Zheng, is the shop hiring? Zheng Dafeng smiled and shook his head, no, I'm going back home tomorrow. It's too hard to make a living in your Old Dragon City. This girl was ridiculously fat, but her voice was soft and sweet. Her face was filled with disappointment. Are you coming back? Zheng Dafeng shook his head, no. She said in shock, didn't you say it was the old house your ancestors bought? What about the shop? Zheng Dafeng could not help but laugh. It's empty. It's a dusty medicine shop. It's normal to eat dust. She blushed slightly. Why don't you give me the key and I'll help you clean it? There's no one in the house. It'll spoil quickly. What a pity. Zheng Dafeng waved his hand. No, there's really no need. Thank you. Miss Zheng Dafeng looked at the sky. The sun was shining brightly, but he said it was getting late and he had to go back to pack his luggage. The girl bit her lip and looked at the hunchbacked man who was running away with a stool. She suddenly asked, Shopkeeper Zheng, aren't you going to ask what my surname is? Zheng Dafeng did not have the face to pretend to be deaf. He could only stop and turn his head. May I ask what your surname is? The girl smiled. I love eating ginger, so my surname is Jiang. Zheng Dafeng was stunned. How should he respond? Just by looking at how she had walked back and forth without saying a word, he knew that this young lady was well-mannered and had a gentle temperament. Today was no exception. She turned to the side and curtsied. I hope shopkeeper Zheng has a safe journey. Zheng Dafeng smiled and waved his hand, bidding her farewell. She was a good girl. That night, in the northern suburbs of Old Dragon City, there was a small, brand-new grave. On the grave, there were a few pieces of bright red paper that were pressed down by small stones. The hunchbacked man squatted in front of the grave and burned a book. Then, he placed 10 small oil lamps in front of the grave. The oil inside the lamps was pitch black and emitted strands of yin qi. However, there were no wicks. How was he going to light the lamps? A yin spirit appeared out of thin air and flicked his finger at the oil lamps. The 10 oil lamps lit up one by one. Upon closer inspection, the wicks of the lamps were extremely strange and frightening. They were actually wisps of smoke in the shape of a human. Their faces were twisted, as if they were enduring the great pain of their souls being burned and their flesh being melted bit by bit into the oil of the lamps. The wicks of the 10 lamps were the 3 souls and 7 spirits of a certain person. The physical body was still there. However, the souls had already been captured by the yin spirit with a vicious spell. The hunchbacked man was indifferent to this. He only squatted there and said softly to the grave, I'm afraid you'll be scared. I'll wait for the lamps to go out before leaving. In the night, in the ancestral home of the Sun family, Sun Jiashu was strolling alone along the river bank. Even though the Sun family's patriarch was already an earth-immortal nascent soul cultivator, he still sighed and groaned these days in regret. Instead, it was Sun Jiashu who comforted the patriarch. This kind of fortune was his fortune, but if he didn't, it would be his fate. He could only assume that the Sun family didn't have such fortune. A young man with a handsome face appeared beside Sun Jiashu silently. Even the Sun family's patriarch and the 3 gold core consecrators didn't notice the slightest ripple of qi. When Sun Jiashu saw the expert who helped him solve the knot in his heart, he immediately bowed and said, Greetings, Mr. Fan. When he schemed against Chen Pinggan, not only did Sun Jiashu almost become enemies with Chen Pinggan, he also almost lost Liu Baqiao, his best friend. It was the man in front of him. Who knew how old he was? The 1,000-year-old expert found Sun Jiashu, who was in a daze. He spoke a few words and gave Sun Jiashu some pointers. Sun Jiashu was enlightened. On the road, you can be considered to have made some achievements. You only tripped over a stone, fell hard and suffered. Can this prove that you're on the wrong path? Chen Pinggan's path is very good, which can prove that you, Sun Jiashu, are on the wrong path? It's either one or the other. You're so childish. What kind of business are you doing? No matter how good other people's path is, it's still their path. You might as well bury yourself in your work. Don't ask about the harvest. Raise your head occasionally and look at the people and scenery on other paths. That's enough. Priceless advice couldn't be bought with money. The expert who looked younger than Sun Jiashu only said that his surname was Fan, but he had almost no relationship with the Fan family in Old Dragon City. Sun Jiashu relied on his intuition and believed this without a doubt. That person smiled. Old Dragon City only has 3 families left. Fu Ju, or that Wang Zhu's Fu family. Fan Junmaro, or the old godlord's Fan family. The last family, your Sun family, has half of it. The other half is Ding Fengho's. You have a long way to go this time, so keep up the good work. Sun Jiashu nodded. My Sun family won't miss this rare opportunity. The man smiled. Once in a blue moon? Not just that. Sun Jiashu was a little dazed. Apart from thinking about the meaning of these words, he also thought about the day he sent Chen Pinggan off. That young man in a white robe and carrying a long sword seemed to have seen him from behind the crowd after the ferry rose into the air. Not only did he not ignore him, he even cupped his fists and bid farewell. In the end, he raised his arm and gave him a thumbs up. Sun Jiashu smiled. It was like this then, and it was like this now. Within the palace of a rising dynasty, a pair of master and disciple walked between two tall walls. The handsome young man in white stretched out his finger and swiped across the wall. The lady beside him was tall, but did not give people a sense of unbalance or clumsiness. As she walked, she did not give off any aura. She did not have the aura of a chi cultivator who was one with the world, she did not have the aura of a martial artist, she did not even have the breathing of a normal person. The tall lady who always had a sword at her waist without a scabbard had just found an ordinary-looking green bamboo scabbard for her sword that was sharpened in the inverted mountain lightning pool a few days ago. It was found by one of her retainers in the Aquarius continent. The young man who looked like a deity smiled and asked, "Master, did you buy it or snatch it?" The lady said indifferently, "I heard that he bought it." The young man sighed, "Then he bought it by force." The lady smiled, "If you feel that this is not right, you can fight with him." The young man said helplessly, "I, Cao Si, am only a Realm 5 martial artist, Sai, how can I fight with him?" The lady stopped in her tracks, missing the word strongest. Cao Si thought for a while, then used the tip of his foot to draw two short lines on the left and right. He raised his foot and pointed to the line on the left. Speaking of Realm 5, the average genius martial artist in the world is here. He moved his foot to the right. "I, Cao Si, am here." Then he pointed in the middle of the two lines. "Other than me, the most outstanding Realm 5 genius in the central divine continent is probably here." The tall lady did not feel that her disciple was young and arrogant, and underestimated the martial artist of the same generation. In truth, she felt that Cao Si was too polite. Cao Si suddenly squatted down and stretched out a finger. She pointed at the line in the middle and moved it slightly towards her own line. "I think that guy will be able to reach here with his 5th realm after I break through." The lady looked down at the position that Cao Si had drawn with his finger, nodding in agreement, "Should be about there." This pair of master and disciple, one standing and one squatting, were chatting about the martial fate of the world. In the distance, the number 1 eunuch in this great dynasty, a ceremony supervisor eunuch who had the potential to reach the realm of immortals, was leading a group of great Martin Temple eunuchs in bright red robes. When they saw the two of them, they all stopped and stood respectfully, not daring to breathe too loudly. When the ferry arrived at the border of Qinghuan Kingdom, Chen Pinggan and the others walked on the bustling street of the ferry. For some reason, no matter if it was chi cultivators or pure martial artists, they would take the initiative to make a detour. The higher the realm of the cultivators, the better their eyesight, and the more experienced the martial artists of the 3 realms of chi cultivators, they would clearly feel an invisible pressure. A beautiful lady with a sword on her back, a tall man with a narrow saber on his waist, a crooked old man with a smile, and a short, sturdy man. They were all not simple. But for some reason, a Jindan cultivator who was hiding his presence in the crowd felt that the aura of these 4 people added together was not as strong as the clearly injured young man with a sword on his back. The moon surrounded by stars. 374. Apart from the one at the border of Shushui country and Songshi country and the one at Qingfu Square, Chen Pinggan either came and went in a hurry or just strolled around without buying anything. Today, he decided to take Pei Qian and the others for a good tour of the ferry. Chen Pinggan gave each of the 4 people in the picture scroll a small piece of money and allowed them to buy whatever they wanted. There was a saying of thousands, hundreds, and tens in the mountain. A small piece of money was worth 1,000 taels of silver in the secular dynasty. A small piece of money was worth 100,000 taels of gold and silver. Spiritual weapons and magic treasures were not an extravagant hope, but they could buy some rare items with interesting craftsmanship from the mountain and keep them in their pockets. It was not difficult to take them out for eye candy. After making an appointment with the four of them, they would meet at the most famous place at the ferry in 2 hours. Chen Pinggan took Pei Qian to walk around and buy things at the ferry. In places like Qingfu Fang, where there were masters, the chances of finding something were very small and the prices were relatively expensive. Some of the people who did not have a place to stay were the best to try their luck and test their judgment. Most of these people were rogue cultivators who lived in the mountains and lakes. They liked to buy things from the descendants of the old rich families at low prices. Some of them claimed that their ancestors or masters had produced Jindan and Yuanying earth immortals. These were the ways to sell things, and the buyers did not need to care about these. Chen Pinggan had learned a lot from Xu Yuanxia, the big-bearded hero who traveled around the world. Later, Yaro Jinji explained that the caged pair actually belonged to this line of business. Pei Qian did not have much experience in the world, so he had a feast for the eyes for all kinds of strange immortal calligraphy and paintings, spiritual artifacts, spirits, and mountain monsters. Pei Qian had one good point, which was that he was ridiculed by Zhu Lian as a little Daotai. He liked to accept things and did not like to spend money, so he could not tell. Therefore, no matter how much she coveted the things, she would only take a few glances and would never open the small sachet that Madame Gui gave her. If she really liked it, she would take a few glances and treat it as her own. It was just a temporary store for her. Chen Pinggan had never been extravagant. Therefore, after walking around with Pei Qian for about an hour and walking down a dozen shops, he did not take out a single copper coin. He saw Chen Pinggan, who was wearing a white robe and carrying a white scabbard long sword. He followed him for 700 to 800 steps. He looked honest, but his speech was not clumsy. He said that his grandfather was a great general of Jing Kingdom. After the fall of Jing Kingdom, His Majesty the Emperor died during his escape. He lost one of the 17 treasures of Jiaotai Palace, the Kaihu Jade Seal, which was brought to the people by his grandfather. Now, a great immortal master of Qingluan Kingdom had already collected all 16 treasures and only this spirit treasure of condensing luck was left. In this industry, perfection was the most important thing. Therefore, this treasure, which might even contain the dragon chi of the kingdom, was priceless. The reason why the man followed him 700 or 800 steps away was because the young man beside him looked like a rich young master. He had a good temper and did not chase him away. Instead, he listened carefully. Secondly, the man was really worried that if he did not open his business, he would suffer a lot. Last year, he managed to get through the new year with great difficulty. It was related to 3 small sums of money, which was enough to buy him several lives. He had lived a miserable new year in fear. According to the rules, after the first month of this year, if no one took the bait, he would really be in trouble. Every country had its laws and every trade had its rules. People could really die. In order to sell some things to survive, the man could be said to be unscrupulous. As a third realm chi cultivator, not only did he shamelessly follow the young master all the way, he even took the initiative to introduce the scenery of the ferry to the young master. The immortal ferry on the border of Qingluan country was called Wasp Tail Ferry. It originated from when the ferry was first built. It was once a small town in the marketplace. In history, there was a jade immortal who started from nothing here. With the identity of a mountain and lake cultivator, he relied on great perseverance and great luck to ascend to the upper 5 realms. All kinds of immortal deeds were spread across half the continent. He was extremely famous among all the rogue cultivators in the Aquarius continent. This person's ancestral home was located in an alley called Wasp Tail Alley. It was also coincidentally located at the end of the alley. Later on, this ferry was named Wasp Tail Ferry. Because the ferry was located at the border of 3 countries, in order to fight over the ownership of this alley and this ancestral home, Qingluan country's Tang family and the 2 neighboring countries used pen and knife to fight countless battles on paper and on the battlefield. However, the 3 sides had a tacit understanding that the battles would not affect the ferry. For this reason, Lakeview Academy specially sent a gentleman and a sage to mediate this matter several times. Under the strong recommendation of the man, the ferry had a unique well wine brewed by immortals in the world. A snowflake cost a small pot. The high officials and dignitaries of Qingwan country liked to use it to show off their wealth. That young master really bought a pot of well wine from a street corner shop and asked for 2 white bowls from the shopkeeper. After sitting down, he actually smiled and gestured for the man to sit down and drink with him. The man originally wanted to stand on the side and act pitiful. Maybe the young master would feel pity for him and buy his tattered belongings. However, the wine in his stomach was really causing trouble. He sat down and drank the wine. As he drank, he complained that he couldn't control his mouth. He thought that if he drank too much wine, it would most likely spoil this deal. For a moment, all sorts of feelings welled up in his heart and he could only treat it as a bowl of wine. Chen Pinggan clinked his bowl with the man's and asked with a smile, "Since this imperial jade seal is valuable and there is an immortal master waiting for it to complete the 17 treasures of Jing country, why not just come and sell it directly?" The man had already prepared a plan to deal with this kind of problem. He smiled bitterly and said, "That old immortal master's cultivation level is very high, but he is. I'm afraid that he won't be alive to spend the money." The man's voice was low and he vaguely said half of it. Chen Pinggan nodded. This explanation made sense. The immortals on the mountain were said to be cultivating, but this Dao had 800 side doors and 3,000 heterodox paths. Therefore, there were also ascendant realm cultivators like Du Maro on the mountain. Even earlier, wasn't there Liu Jimao, the immortal of the river severing from the Book Slip Lake? As for the group of Qi cultivators who had evil intentions, if not for the fact that their skills were not as good as the others, they would have killed him and Lu Tai if they had surrounded and killed him and Lu Tai. With such wealth, perhaps there would be 1 or 2 more Earth Immortals of gold core in the world. The man probably felt that if he didn't use some strong medicine, he would miss out on this rich outsider. He put down the wine bowl and said in a low voice, "Actually, my ancestor was the great general of Jing Kingdom. It was a taboo for the Venerable One to deceive people. My grandfather was actually a servant in the Peaceful Square in the old Jing Kingdom's capital. The Peaceful Square was originally a place where the royal family raised rare and exotic animals. Later on, due to the lack of financial resources, it was abandoned and was used to settle the eunuchs and palace maids who were banished from the palace after making a mistake. The fallen emperor of Jing Kingdom grew up in the Peaceful Square when he was young and was often taken care of by my grandfather when he was young. Later on, he made a meteoric rise and from an illegitimate child who was hidden outside, he somehow became the emperor. No matter what happened to his country, he was still a sentimental emperor and treated my grandfather with great respect. After the capital was invaded by the army of Yunxiao Kingdom, he fled to the Peaceful Square. I was young at that time and didn't remember much. In short, this imperial jade seal was passed down from my grandfather's hands. Before he left, he told me that I must pass this imperial jade seal to the descendants of Jing Kingdom and not treat it as my own. Speaking of this, the man drank a mouthful of wine and his eyes were dazed. I'm an unfilial descendant. I've let down my grandfather's last words and also let down the crown prince of the Jing Kingdom who changed his surname to cultivate in the mountains. The man's lips trembled and there were tears in his eyes. Young master, please do a good deed and buy this precious jade seal. In the future, I can buy wine and pretend to be drunk. I don't have to look at it every day and feel guilty until I die. Chen Pinggan poured another bowl of amber wine for the man. He shook his head and said, I can treat you to the wine, but I won't buy the item. The man was still unwilling to give up. Young master, don't you want to take a look at it? I believe you can tell if it's real or fake. When the time comes, even if young master haggles the price, I won't regret it. Chen Pinggan still shook his head. I don't have good fortune, so forget it. Find a buyer who knows the goods and is fated. Don't waste your time on me. Pei Qian just wanted to speak, but he glanced at Chen Pinggan and immediately shut up. The man drank the second bowl of wine, apologized and thanked him. Then, he stood up and left in a daze. Pei Qian whispered, it's quite pitiful. Chen Pinggan drank the wine. It's true that is pitiful, but the item might not be real. Pei Qian wondered, how do you know if you haven't seen it? What if it's real? Anyway, we're not in a hurry. Chen Pinggan patiently explained, what if this one, if it really falls on our heads, of course, This is the best result. Then let's talk about the worst result. Pei Qian was confused. Isn't it fake? We made a mistake and cheated some divine money from that guy. Pei Qian suddenly slapped the table with both hands and said with heartache, "This can't be tolerated." Chen Pinggan smiled and said, "This is not the worst result. The worst situation is that we set up a badger trap for others. Not only will we be forced to buy and sell, but once we can afford the divine money, the other party will take a mile after taking an inch and simply kill us to rob us. Let's just talk about this person's character. After all, we're not familiar with him. Even if his nature is not bad, once he encounters a hurdle that he can't get over, such as owing a lot of debt, the person who owes the debt is weak and the person who demands the debt is ruthless. When the two are added together, then the pitiful person must be hateful. If we pity him now, who will pity us later?" Pei Qian thought for a moment. "We have a lot of people. Anyway, we're in the right. Why don't we beat them to death with 2 or 3 punches?" Chen Pinggan chested. "When we're outside, if we only rely on our fists to reason, then Du Maro can meet us. Can't we meet others?" Pei Qian felt wronged. "But we're good people. Old Thief Du is not an evil person. After being struck by lightning, being thrown into a frying pan, having his tongue pulled out, his heart cut open, and red-hot iron poured into his mouth." Chen Pinggan interrupted Pei Qian's nonsense. "Where did you learn all these things?" Pei Qian said with a lingering fear, "Last time during the Lantern Festival in Old Dragon City, there was a lantern festival that Xiaobai said was warning the world and educating people, shaking off evil and promoting good. At that time, I stared at it for a while and felt that it had nothing to do with me. But the book said that if there is something wrong, then there is something wrong." Chen Pinggan's sword-nourishing gourd was now filled with a small amount of medicinal wine, so it was not appropriate to store the ferry's specialty well immortal wine. He also had many jars of Osmanthus wine given by the Fan family in his jade tablet. In fact, in the past year, he had no shortage of good wine to satisfy his cravings, so he only bought 2 jars from the store. He planned to put them together with the Osmanthus wine. When he reached Luorpa Mountain, he would bury them together behind the bamboo house. Every 10 years, 1 jar would be raised. It could be considered one of Chen Pinggan's rich family assets. On the other side of the Bee-Tail Alley, he met up with Wei Xian and the other 3 who had arrived one after another. On this trip to the Bee-Tail Ferry, Chen Pinggan did not take a fancy to anything particularly interesting. He only bought Pei Qian a beautifully illustrated sage book. The engraving was excellent, and every word was full of spirit. Just as Chen Pinggan was about to leave the ferry, a young man carrying an empty wine jug walked out of the alley. He was tall and sturdy, and there was a fine iron chain-like belt around his waist. Chen Pinggan narrowed his eyes for a moment, but soon returned to normal. He planned to avoid trouble and pretend that he did not know him. Unexpectedly, the man saw Chen Pinggan and quickly walked in front of Chen Pinggan. He stretched out a finger and pointed. He probably vaguely recognized Chen Pinggan, but could not remember his name. For a moment, he looked somewhat anxious. Whether it was a blessing or a curse, he could not avoid it. Chen Pinggan could only smile and greet him. He said in the language of the Aquarius continent, "We met at the entrance of that small town. At that time, I was inside with the gatekeeper, and you were standing outside the gate. Your memory is really good. After so long, you can still recognize me." The tall and sturdy young man smiled and nodded. He was somewhat happy. "Yes, it's you. Other than the gatekeeper, you are the first person I saw from the small town. I did not expect to see you here. At first, I did not dare to recognize you. You have changed too much. You said that I have a good memory, but I feel that you are not bad. You are even better than me." Seeing that Chen Pinggan was carrying 2 jugs of well wine, the young man with stubble on his chin laughed. "You have made a loss by buying this well wine. The real and authentic well wine is brewed from the 3 oldest wells. These 2 jugs of well wine were made by the merchants who went against their conscience and secretly built more than 10 new wells. The taste is not right. Let's go, I will bring you to buy the real old well wine. Otherwise, you will have wasted your trip to Bee-Tail Ferry." He took a step and laughed. Forget it, the Jianghu is dangerous. Let's not get close to each other. The tall and sturdy young man told Chen Pinggan the addresses of the 2 wine shops. If you want to buy wine, go buy yourself. I will not make people think that I am trying to please you for no reason. Otherwise, both of us will be on tenterhooks. He cupped his fists and bade farewell to Chen Pinggan and strode away to buy wine. He was a straightforward person. Chen Pinggan sighed in his heart. The iron chain used as a belt by the tall and sturdy young man was clearly the thick iron chain in the iron lock well before the Black Pearl Cave was broken and fell. At that time, Chen Pinggan heard that this person had taken away this great opportunity. In addition to the 5 elements objects, among the many magic weapons hidden in the Black Pearl Cave at that time, this object, Song Jisin's green gourd, mountain prawn pot, and the bright evil suppression mirror were the most precious. This dragon lock iron chain was the most valuable one. It was the demon binding rope that had successfully bound the last real dragon in the world. It could be imagined how valuable it was. Now it had been refined into a natal item by this person, and he was openly showing it to others. It was estimated that he was either bold with great skill, or had a strong backing, or both. That was the first time Chen Pinggan really came into contact with the outside world. The mountain-moving ape of Zhengyang Mountain, Cai Qinqian of Yunxia Mountain, the Shu family of Qingfeng City, and Fu Nanhua of Old Dragon City. It was one life and death situation after another. It was the most difficult period of Chen Pinggan's life. That kind of helplessness was even greater than when Chen Pinggan faced the Yuanying stage Old Dragon in the Flood Dragon Ditch and Ascendant Realm Du Marrow in Old Dragon City in the years to come. It was just like Lu Baixiang confided in the small courtyard that time. On the road of life, as long as you can meet a flower in the barren land, everything will be different. Chen Pinggan met a good girl. When she smiled, Chen Pinggan felt like he was the richest girl in the world. How could he not like her? How could he not be willing to put her in his heart? The last time Old Dragon City drank with Fan on the roof of the medicine shop, Chen Pinggan said, "The girl I like, she is already the most beautiful. But she is even more beautiful than the most beautiful. When I look at her and she pretends not to know, she turns her face sideways and her eyelashes tremble slightly." The story of quarrying stone at that time, Fan was a little confused and asked him, "How much do you like that girl, Chen Pinggan?" Chen Pinggan was a little drunk at that time, but he was holding the blade-strengthening gourd and laughing foolishly. When Chen Pinggan followed the route to find the real old well wine, the burly young man didn't want to bump into the young man who left Liju Cave Heaven again to avoid arousing suspicion, so he deliberately chose a different wine shop. On the way, an old man with restrained spirit quietly appeared, came to the young man's side, and said a small thing. The young man laughed angrily and said, "These guys have water in their heads. They really value money more than their lives. Pass a message to the person in charge and tell them to stop. Don't let them be a feast for others." He wanted to say something else, to take the opportunity to teach Betail Ferry a lesson, but when he thought of the difficult life of an itinerant cultivator, the young man shook his head helplessly. "That's it. There's no need to deliberately knock them down. It's all their own good fortune. However, no one in Betail Ferry is allowed to provoke the group of foreigners I just met. Also, take this opportunity to help old Liu pay off his debt in private. According to the rules, it's a small sum of money. After that, find a chance to scare old Liu again and tell him not to be a gambler anymore. His current wealth is enough for him to live comfortably for the rest of his life." The old man carefully asked, "If Liu Gonzi can't control himself in the future, will he gamble again?" The burly young man said, "Then he has only himself to blame. I can help him once, but not forever." The old man wanted to say something but stopped. The burly young man shook his head and said, "Although that imperial jade seal is genuine, ordinary chi refinement warriors can't touch it. Master said before that we shouldn't underestimate the remnant luck of a fallen country. There are great blessings and misfortunes in it. After all, the Jiang family of Jing country still has a crown prince who is cultivating in the mountains. As for that guy who is bent on collecting the full set of Jing country's 17 treasures, he's on the path of dragon supporting technique. He's suitable, but we can't. If we can't control our greed, We'll be the same kind of people as old Liu. We might even be worse. It's unreasonable for us Qi refinement warriors to cultivate immortality. If we continue to gamble with the heavens, we'll be tired of living." The old man obeyed the order and left. This old retainer who lived in seclusion at B-Tail Ferry was the golden core cultivator who saw Chen Ping'an's aura at first glance. The burly young man sighed along the way until he bought a pot of wine and drank the mellow and authentic immortal brew. Only then did his mood become better. When he was young, he was chosen by a wandering master who passed by the sea. He told the family that he had an excellent foundation and was accepted as a disciple. His parents happily agreed because at first, the elders in the family were certain that he was not suitable for cultivation. He was regarded as a good-for-nothing by his peers who matured early in the family and was treated with disdain. After that, he left the family at a young age and brought B-Tail Ferry to his master. He lived in the shabby alley at the tail of the B-Tail Ferry. In the past few years, his cultivation had risen rapidly and he had also seized many opportunities. However, the young man did not have any thoughts of returning home in glory and being proud of the high and strict family. He only wanted to secretly return home, meet his parents and repay the kindness of raising him. However, the young man had always been grateful to his elder sister who was born in the direct line of descent of the family's head branch. He would repay the kindness of a drop of water with a gushing spring. The people on the mountain liked to talk about it, but they would not take it seriously in their hearts. However, he was willing to take it seriously. Therefore, even if his master was very distressed, he still insisted on giving the little thing that he inadvertently caught as one of her dowry. It was said that the whole family was in an uproar at that time. They could not believe it. As a person, he did not owe money and did not feel guilty. He felt that this was quite good. Drinking wine, the proprietress of the tavern was an average-looking woman. She was honest and dutiful, guarding the ancestral craft and the old well. She was not very good at doing business. The business of cornucopia, which should have made a lot of money every day, was turned into a small business for her. Over the years, he had seen with his own eyes that the gentle-natured big sister next door had married and become a married woman. Year after year, she sold wine. She would still blush and be embarrassed when she met with frivolous drinkers. However, wrinkles gradually grew on the corners of her eyes. The burly young man was glad that he had met his master. Perhaps one day, the proprietress's grandson would be old and he would still have his current appearance. Although the Wasp-Tail Ferry was a ferry for immortals, there were many common people who could not escape from birth, old age, illness, and death. His master always said that these people at the foot of the mountain who had white hair in 60 years and 70 years old in their 70s were the root of the small group of cultivators on the mountain. Without them, the so-called cultivation was just an attic in the sky. The burly young man did not think too much about this. He was too lazy to think about it. In any case, when it came to cultivation, he had always liked to go with the flow. He did not take the initiative to harm others, and when he was harmed, he would not be soft-hearted. So his master had always advised him to choose one of the 3 emperors of Qingluan Kingdom, the Yang family of Yunxiao Kingdom, and the He family of Qingshan Kingdom. Then, he would conceal his identity and go to court to sharpen his Tao heart. He would find the right medicine early on and resolve his inner demons, so that he would not have to rush to Buddha's feet when he reached the nascent soul stage. However, he had always refused to go. What was the point of interacting with emperors all day long? The emperor of the Tang family was extravagant and wanted to save face. He liked to compete with the immortals on the mountain in terms of wealth. The emperor of the He family of Qingshan Kingdom had strange hobbies. He had the shocking 5 beauties in the harem. The entire court was a mess. The emperor of the Yang family was ambitious and worked hard to govern, but he was vicious and merciless. He liked to use the abacus even more than the disciples of the merchant family. It was said that he had personally written a popular Qian Ben Cao, which said, "Money, sweet taste, great heat, is both poison and medicine." He drank a pot of wine and paid the bill. He filled the pot with a few dozen catties of immortal wine from the well. He tied it to his waist and swaggered off. He also asked for 2 small pots of fine wine, which he held between his fingers. The woman was not surprised by this. The entire B-Tail ferry knew that this young man's identity was not simple. No one dared to provoke him. He had lived in the depths of the alley on B-Tail ferry since he was very young and had never provoked anyone. It was said that he only looked after half of the alley for someone and was responsible for collecting rent. Those who were able to rent a house on B-Path were either itinerant immortal cultivators with bulging wallets or the officials of the Three Kingdoms. The rest were the local forces who had bought the house directly. The latter treated the young man who grew up under their noses with great respect. The burly young man walked back into the alley and gradually entered the depths of the alley. 50 steps behind him, in the middle of the alley, there were 2 big empty houses opposite the door. On the door, there were 2 painted door gods that had not been changed for hundreds of years. On the left side, there were 2 painted door gods, and on the right side, there were 2 painted door gods. When the young man walked past the 2 houses, he threw a wine pot in each hand. There were a total of 4 painted door gods on the left and right side, and each of them stretched out a golden arm to catch the wine pot and put it back into the door. Then, on the 2 painted door gods, there was an inexplicable extra paper wine pot. After drinking the wine, they passed the wine pot to their nearby colleagues. After drinking the wine, the 4 painted door gods returned to normal. However, the beard of a big bearded door god seemed to be soaked, but it quickly dried up. The burly young man returned to the house that he lived in alone. It was cold and cheerless. It had been like this for so many years. His master liked to wander around. In the past, he would solemnly vow that this time, he would definitely find a beautiful master's wife. This time, it was not for the future master's wife who was sleeping in her mother's womb. It was a serious matter. He said that he was going for the glazed golden body of an upper 5 realms immortal weapon disintegration. There were a few pieces that fell on the territory of the Aquarius continent. If he could snatch one of them, he would be rich and would have a wife. For this, his master even found a close friend. Otherwise, he might not be able to compete with a few old tortoises of similar age. With the help of that friend, the possibility of success would be greater. The burly young man also had some concerns. He was worried that such a precious treasure would make his so-called friend covet it. His master laughed and said that everyone in the Aquarius continent had this possibility, but this old tortoise who called himself Jade-Faced Young Gentleman would never do it. Although this person's temper was stubborn and smelly, worse than a stone in a latrine pit, this person was known as without a ghost in his heart on the path of cultivation. In this life, for the sake of his friends and for the sake of the sect's honor, he had fought to the death twice. After reaching the unpolished Jade Realm twice, he fell back to the nascent Soul Realm twice. This kind of heroic spirit might not even be found in the Ascendant Realm. Wind Snow Temple's sword master Yuan Ting was now a military saint. In his early years, he was also famous for his straightforward temper. He once threatened that as long as this person needed a sword, Yuan Ting would not only immediately forge a sword, but would also personally deliver it to the mountain. It was the first time the burly young man had seen his master so calm, so he was relieved. For a moment, he was curious about his master's old friend who was nicknamed Elegant and Unique. After Chen Pingan bought 2 more pots of old well-immortal wine, the group went to the last sightseeing spot at B-Tail Ferry. It was a 1,000-year-old ancient apricot tree that covered several acres of land. The bottom of the tree was hollow and filled with copper coins and gold and silver. About this tree, the man who called himself Liu Ganzi told a lot about it. Before the rise of Qingshan Kingdom from the ruins of Jing Kingdom, this old apricot tree had a story. First, the founding emperor of the Tang family of Qinghuan Kingdom made an exception and conferred it as the tree of the emperor. Later, the emperor of Jing Kingdom did not want to fall behind, so he sent a court official to confer the tree. It was probably 1 grade lower, so the place was known as the Prime Minister tree. In the end, the emperor of Yunxiao Kingdom also joined in the fun. 300 years ago, when Yunxiao Kingdom was at its peak, a meritorious general rode a horse here and erected a monument. Therefore, the people of Yunxiao Kingdom were still used to calling it the General Apricot. The tree of the emperor, the Prime Minister tree, and the General Apricot. One tree conferred 3 titles. It was a strange story. Under the tree, Pei Qian took out the small sachet that Aunt Gui gave her. At that time, other than a few emerald osmanthus leaves, there was also a small osmanthus branch about the length of her finger. It was full of osmanthus seeds. Even if it was broken off and separated from the tree, the fragrance did not diminish in the slightest. Moreover, the golden osmanthus seeds did not fall off. The osmanthus leaves and branches were all placed in the treasure box, occupying a space. She only took out the empty sachet to store the snow flower that Chen Pinggan gave her as New Year's money, as well as a few copper coins that she earned through hard work. For example, when she begged Sui Yuyu to buy New Year's goods in Old Dragon City, she bargained for 1 copper coin each time. At that time, she earned 7 or 8 copper coins in a spurt of energy and put them all in the sachet. Because Chen Pinggan said that the sachet was not an ordinary item, Pei Qian did not dare to casually tie it around her waist. Usually, she only dared to put it in her sleeve pocket. At this moment, she was holding it with both hands, thinking that it would be nice if she could get some more apricot leaves and apricot branches. There were not many tourists around the 1,000-year-old apricot tree. The native people of the ferry would only come here to throw money and pray for blessings during the New Year or other festivals. Most of the passengers on the B-Tail ferry were merchants who were familiar with this place. They did not believe in such things and were not willing to spend money. Therefore, at this moment, there was only Chen Pinggan and his group, along with a few groups of children who were playing with each other. Further away, a few children were flying kites. On the high branches of the apricot tree, there were a few kites that unfortunately had their strings broken. Chen Pinggan looked at the apricot tree that was faintly flowing with spiritual aura and was about to leave. However, he found that the little lotus person had drilled out from the ground and was standing on the hollow abdomen of the apricot tree, which was like a door, sticking her head out and looking around. Soon, another head popped out from the pile of money and looked at the little lotus person. The latter climbed out of the pile of money, straightened her back, and put her hands on her hips. She looked very arrogant, but she could not hide the curiosity and joy in her eyes. The little guy's clothes were luxurious and comical. He wore a cute, pocket-sized bright yellow dragon robe. There was an ivory jade tablet and a mahogany scabbard on his waist. Pei Qian pulled Chen Pinggan's sleeve. Chen Pinggan thought for a moment and took out a piece of snow and gave it to Pei Qian. He said with a smile, "Go. Remember to talk nicely to this little immortal. Don't offend her." Pei Qian ran over and squatted at the small door. After about the time it took to burn a stick of incense, Pei Qian returned with a full load. Chen Pinggan did not know whether to laugh or cry. Without saying anything, he rewarded her with a chestnut. However, this time, the little lotus person unexpectedly stood on Pei Qian's side for the first time. She was dancing with joy and babbling. Pei Qian felt a little guilty. She turned around obediently and wanted to return the piece of grass in her hand. The G of soil, as well as the pink sapling, was returned to the apricot tree spirit. What a pity! She had even taken out 2 snowflakes to spend. This transaction could be considered a loss. The little lotus person was relatively stupid and did not know how to speak. The little thing dressed in fancy clothes was much smarter. It spoke the language of the Aquarius continent more fluently than Pei Qian. The little thing chattered with the little lotus person for a long time. At that time, Pei Qian did not understand. Then, the little lotus person knocked on Pei Qian's boots and pointed at the piece of snow in Pei Qian's hand. Pei Qian began to bargain with the apricot tree spirit. At the same time, Pei Qian also boasted to it that the spiritual qi in her home was much more abundant than here. It was as thick as water and she could drink until she was full with just one mouthful. In the end, the silly little thing coyly made a small sapling on the ground in front of Pei Qian. It told Pei Qian to bring it back to its hometown and find a place to plant it. It must not mistreat it and must let it drink the water-like spiritual qi every day. Pei Qian agreed verbally and patted her chest loudly, but in fact, she was already prepared to eat chestnuts until she was full. After Chen Pinggan understood what happened, he took the soil and sapling from Pei Qian's hand and walked to the roots of the tree and squatted down. The little thing dressed in a dragon robe, hanging a jade tablet and carrying a saber, stood in the pile of money. Its eyes were full of vigilance. After a series of questions, Chen Pinggan knew the truth. It turned out that it was about to enter the 5 middle states, but there was not enough anima chi here. To be precise, it did not dare to absorb too much anima chi. After all, there were a lot of chi trainers here, and it was a ferryport for immortals. The reason why it could take root and practice here was because it relied on 3 so-called titles that were not so legitimate. In fact, the imperial court of the 3 kingdoms did not care too much about it, not to mention the power behind this ferry. The weakening of anima chi had always been the most taboo thing on the Mountain of Immortals. For example, Du Maro forcibly occupied the anima contained in the small cave of Wutong. Although he was more selfish and wanted to ascend to another place, in fact, once he succeeded in ascending, according to the rules set by the vast world ritual sage, the Tongye sect could rely on merits and the school academy would protect the word sect for at least 1,000 years. It was undeniable that this was an important reason why Du Maro wanted to take the risk of ascending. Otherwise, he could just hide in the cave of Wutong. After Du Mao's failure in ascending, almost all the disciples of the Tongye sect changed from being in awe and love of the ancestor of resurgence to being extremely resentful of Du Mao. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was unforgettable. They regarded him as the eternal sinner of the Tongye sect. What the hell ancestor of resurgence? He was the defeated ancestor who squandered the foundation of his ancestors. As for Du Mao's original intention of throwing himself into another big cage to find a way out for the Tongye sect, very few people thought about this. The purple-robed sword practitioner, the lord of the Tongye sect, and the old cultivator in the raw jade realm who was in charge of the archives of the Hall of Patriarchs, did not deliberately suppress, guide, and ease the anger of the people in the sect for some reason. Du Mao's lineage, such as the direct descendant Du Yang, not only lost the treatment of a Yuanning retainer, but also was questioned. The Du family's property was almost turned upside down to the sect to fill the vacancy. It was either one or the other, black or white. It was the two ends of a ruler. Especially when it was related to one's own interests, it seemed that this was human nature. Chen Pinggan hoped that in the future, if one day he really opened his own sect, he would rather that from the beginning, no one would think that he, Chen Pinggan, was a flawless moral saint. In the end, if there was really an irreversible change, no one would think that he was an unforgivable evil person. Even if the people's hearts were scattered, he should strive for a good separation and try to achieve a good beginning and a good ending. The poison concubine of time travel Chen Pinggan squatted on the ground and lowered his head to look at the ancient apricot spirit. He asked with a smile, "Didn't you discuss with the immortal masters here at Bee's Tail Ferry to be a consecrated guest or something like that? After finding one of the 5 peaks and signing a mountain pledge contract, they should be happy to see one more king of the middle 5 peaks who can't run away." The little fellow sat on the top of Chen Mountain with a worried face and said in a childish voice, "I also want to, but those stinky guys trust me, but I don't trust them. This is a troublesome place." Bee's Tail Ferry is adjacent to the 3 countries of Qingluan, Qingshan, and Yunxiao. The few forces at the ferry are intertwined and no one is willing to submit to anyone. For money, they would secretly beat each other's brains out for no reason. For the mountain pledge contract, which of the 5 peaks do you think I should choose? Even if I foolishly choose one, won't the other 2 hate me to death? Maybe one day they will secretly find someone to chop my body into pieces and burn it as firewood. Although now the incense is bleak and I have to eat 3 meals, but at least I won't die. Don't you chi cultivators say that a bad life is better than a good death? Well, there's also that saying that a dead Taoist is better than a dead Taoist. Chen Pinggan pretended that he didn't hear the last sentence. He deeply agreed with the little fellow's worries. As an apricot spirit who had no one to rely on, if he wanted to break through the realm, he would need to sign a mountain pledge with the chi cultivators. But Bee's Tail Ferry was located at the border of the 3 regions and was not under the jurisdiction of any country. So this was really a big trouble. If Bee's Tail Ferry was a dominant force, it would be fine. Chen Pinggan wanted to help but could not. The little fellow said pitifully, "I heard from the little black girl that Immortal Master lives in a place like a paradise and absorbs aura like the mortals drinking water. Why don't you help me and bring this little sapling back? Once it grows, It can also help Immortal Master to stabilize the aura of the mountains and rivers. This is a mutually beneficial thing for both of us. Ordinary chi cultivators, not mentioning the merchants who only care about money, just the farmers and the Yarrow family, who wouldn't treat this as a blessing from the heavens. Immortal Master who is passing by, you must cherish it well. Chen Pinggan put the soil and the sapling on the ground and smiled. Do you want to say if you don't take what is given by the heavens, you will be punished instead? The little fellow was dejected and scratched his cheeks. The two little ones are easy to fool. You, the big one, are experienced in the pugilistic world. Sure enough, it is not easy to fool you. Once Chen Pinggan planted this little sapling on his mountain, it was true that the sapling could help to stabilize the aura of the mountains and rivers. However, it was extremely limited. More importantly, it was constantly stealing aura for the ancestral tree. Therefore, it was definitely a money-losing business. As for the inside story of these tree spirits, when Chen Pinggan was on Osmanthus Island, because there was an old locust tree in his hometown town, he chatted with the old sword cultivator Ma Ji of the Fan family and knew some inside story. After Chen Pinggan returned the soil and the sapling, the apricot flower spirit was still a little discerning. It also gave Pei Qian 2 snowflakes to spend. The little lotus flower spirit was sickly and Pei Qian was also embarrassed. The two little ones felt sorry for Chen Pinggan. Chen Pinggan put the little lotus flower spirit on his shoulder and held Pei Qian's hand. He smiled softly and said, "What are you feeling guilty for?" It should be the one feeling guilty. At the bottom of the apricot tree, inside the big door, Qian Shan yawned and said, "We can only wait for the next fool to take the bait." It fell asleep in a daze and had a beautiful dream. It actually dreamt that it was on a constantly growing and towering mountain, growing into a towering tree. Every apricot leaf was brimming with a golden aura and every branch was incomparably pure from the golden incense. It had become the only upper 5-realm tree spirit in the Aquarius continent. On its branches, there were 2 blurred figures looking at the sea of clouds. One of them was drinking wine while the other had a sword and blade on his waist. When the little fellow woke up, it was extremely happy. Even if it was just a dream, it would be happy for many years. But for some reason, when it wiped its face, it was actually full of tears. It laid in the pile of money in a daze. It was puzzled and somewhat disappointed. The 4 people in the picture, with the small sum of money that was worth 100 snowflakes, each had their own gains. When Zhu Lian left Old Dragon City, he had an extra bag on his back. This time, when he left Tail Crossing, the bag was even heavier. Now that Zhu Lian considered himself a scholar, of course, he would travel to study. The 4 of them still walked to the capital of Qingluan Kingdom. 2 years ago, Qingluan Kingdom opened a huge water and land Taoist temple, which was personally organized by the emperor of the Tang family. The next year, Yunxiao Kingdom and Qingshan Kingdom held a Taoist Luotian grand ritual at almost the same time, as if they were competing on a stage. The emperor of the Tang family decided to hold a debate between Taoism and Buddhism this spring. He wanted to choose between Taoism and Buddhism to become the national religion of Qingluan Kingdom, with a higher status than Confucianism. The loser would naturally be at the bottom. So Chen Pinggan believed that Zhong Shanfeng and Xu Yuanxia would at least stay in the capital of Qingluan this spring. Probably because of the proximity to Tail Crossing, as well as the many Taoist temples and mountains within the territory, Qingluan Kingdom did not belong to the kind of lawless place where spiritual energy was thin to the point of being scarce. Compared to the Shu Shui Kingdom that Chen Pinggan passed by, there was much more spiritual energy. At that time, he was a pure martial artist and did not have a deep feeling, only a rough feeling. Now that he had refined the water character seal as his natal item, he could slowly absorb spiritual energy. Comparing the two, he discovered the mystery. In the central part of the Aquarius continent, among the countries that Chen Pinggan had been to, the Tsai Kingdom had slightly more spiritual energy. As for the Tsai Kingdom, Chen Pinggan now had the talisman in his Fengsuan item. There was also a white-bone beautiful ghost that had signed a contract with him. It was just that Chen Pinggan did not like her. After Osmanthus Island, he did not let her leave the strange talisman that was the place where she lived. However, when he reached Luopo Mountain in the future, he could let her out. With a mountain god overlooking the surrounding mountains and rivers, he believed that to the female ghost, it would also be intimidating. The orthodox mountain and river god of the Dali dynasty? It was not something that any dynasty in the Aquarius continent could compare to. God Dali. It could naturally be one level higher. Now, in the future, half of the Aquarius continent would already be in the hands of the Song clan. They only lacked the approval of a certain Confucian school in the central region. So, in the future, God Dali, and the god of the Aquarius continent, there would not be much difference. When leaving the border of B-Tail Crossing, he found that travelers from outside to inside, regardless of whether they were chi cultivators or martial artists, had to hold a yellow talisman that was sold at the gate. When they entered, a rippling door would appear for them to pass through. The talisman was similar to the customs pass of the secular dynasty. This was something new. It was Chen Pingan's first time seeing this. The other crossings did not have this toll. Leaving B-Tail Crossing, they did not need the customs pass talisman. After walking out of the gate, Chen Pingan asked the gatekeeper of a fifth realm chi cultivator sincerely for advice. That person saw that Chen Pingan's temperament was not ordinary, and that he walked out of B-Tail Crossing, so he smiled and explained to Chen Pingan. It turned out that B-Tail Crossing had a mountain and river array that was jointly created by the school of Yin-Yang and Mechanism Masters. Golden Core Earth Immortals could directly walk in, but those below the Golden Core needed a customs pass talisman that was worth 5 snow coins. Yes, once they forced their way in, they would alarm the patrolmen of B-Tail Crossing. As for the talisman, it was a side branch of the barrier-breaking talisman, and also a request talisman for B-Tail Crossing. They sent an immortal master to create it for this array. When Chen Pingan asked why other crossings did not need the talisman, when they were clearing the way, the chi cultivator smiled playfully, stepped on the ground, and asked whose territory this was. The direction of this gate led to the territory of Qing Luan Kingdom. Chen Pingan naturally replied that it was the Tang family of Qing Luan. Without waiting for the chi cultivator to elaborate, Chen Pingan suddenly realized that the emperor of the Tang family was really good at making money. The capital of Qing Luan Kingdom was more than 1,600 miles away from B-Tail Crossing, and there was still more than 2 months before the debate between Buddhism and Taoism that began in the rainy season. Therefore, there was no harm in walking there. After that, along the way, they saw many Taoist temples of various sizes. The group did not believe in Buddhism and Taoism, but they generally went to the temples because of its reputation. Chen Pingan and Pei Qian respectfully offered 3 incense sticks as a courtesy to the gods. Wei Xian did not believe in this and generally did not go in, but just waited at the door. Zhu Lian also did not believe in this and only accompanied Chen Pingan and Pei Qian to walk around. Lu Baixiang only entered the temple to offer incense and was very pious. Sui Yuyu entered the temple to offer incense and was also very sincere. Chen Pingan reminded Pei Qian that it was okay to offer incense, but not to make a wish casually. Moreover, he could not kowtow and make a wish when he saw the bodhisattvas and deities in the temple. However, he also told Pei Qian that if one day he had a feeling and really wanted to make a wish, then he had to be serious and remember the content of the wish, as well as which temple and deity he was offering incense and kowtowing to. Once the wish was fulfilled, no matter how far it was in the future, he had to come back to fulfill the wish. Seeing Chen Pingan's solemn expression, Pei Qian was so scared that she did not dare to make a wish and only offered incense. Otherwise, when she thought of rushing from Longquan County to Qing Luan Country to fulfill the wish, she felt that if she did not die of exhaustion, her intestines would turn green with regret and she would cry half to death on the way. Moreover, when she went in to kowtow and offer incense, Chen Pingan also had a rule. He said that the money for offering incense could not be borrowed from others and must be paid by Pei Qian herself. Fortunately, along the way, Chen Pingan had asked Pei Qian to run errands several times. The skinny little girl received quite a few silver taels. After changing them into copper coins, it was enough for her to offer incense at the temple. Pei Qian did not feel that Chen Pingan was stingy with these few copper coins. She increasingly felt that Chen Pingan was much more generous to her, his first disciple, than to old Wei and the other 3. This made Pei Qian very happy. During the awakening of hibernation, in the wilderness of a small county in Qingluan country, even though they were more than 100 li away, Chen Pinggan and the others could still feel the earth trembling and the mountains shaking. In the distance, dust flew up, covering the sky and the sun. There was a huge monster with a vague outline, as if it was in great pain, roaring towards the sky. For a moment, countless birds in the forest flapped their wings and flew away. Chen Pinggan thought for a while, then let Wei Xian and Sui Yuyu rush over first to see if there were any innocent people harmed. Right now, his injuries had not completely healed, and he also had to weigh the compatibility between the lake of spiritual energy and the pure Zhenqi. Although his martial arts realm was still at the bottleneck of the 5th level, his true strength was only at the level of the 4th level. Wei Xian held the sweet Ju Joshi. Sui Yuyu carried the sword of infatuation on his back. Both of them were good at both offense and defense. Even if they were in danger, it would not be difficult for them to escape unscathed. Chen Pinggan didn't deliberately hasten his pace. When Sui Yuyu and Wei Xian returned, they said that there was the so-called Earth Bull over there. A large group of cultivators from the mountains and lakes had somehow found this Earth Bull that had been hibernating here for hundreds of years. They wanted to kill it and obtain the heavenly materials and earthly treasures from its body. However, they were stopped by two meddlesome people. One was a young Taoist priest with a peachwood sword, and the other was a bearded man with a saber. The two sides did not come to an agreement and started to fight. There was a great disparity in strength between the two sides. Besieging and killing one side was inevitable. There was even a Jindan cultivator personally presiding over the situation. Chen Pinggan patted the sword-cultivating gourd and jumped up high. Flying swords 1 and 15 flew out of the gourd. Chen Pinggan stepped on the flying swords step by step and hurried away like an immortal riding the wind. The four people in the painting looked at each other. Pei Qian held the mountain walking stick and looked left and right. What's going on? Sui Yuyu flashed away. Zhu Lian laughed heartily and followed closely behind. Another fight to fight, this feels great. Wei Xian carried Pei Qian on his back. Lu Baixiang followed silently. It was a little strange. Why did Chen Pinggan forget himself like this? Was there an acquaintance over there? But Chen Pinggan came from Liju Cave and lived in Mud Bottle Alley. Even if he was an acquaintance, shouldn't he be the 9th realm warrior Zheng Dafeng, the 10th realm great master Li the sword whiz Kaoshi, and the lord of heaven Xieshe? Chen Pinggan's hometown was full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. It was a little unreasonable. Even if an old monster of the ascendant realm suddenly appeared one day, Lu Baixiang and the other four people in the painting would not be too shocked. However, if a small character in the middle 5 realms suddenly appeared and said that he was Chen Pinggan's friend, the four of them would not be used to it. Even if Chen Pinggan had 2 flying swords to help him, he was still injured after all. His pure genuine qi was somewhat hindered, so his speed was still about the same as Sui Yoyo's group on the ground. In a huge coal with countless broken stones, a yellow earth bull that was seriously injured and had to show its true form was lying in a pool of blood. In front of it stood the embarrassed young Taoist priest and the bearded swordsman. The two of them stood back to back, surrounded by more than 20 qi cultivators like wolves. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, a young man dressed in white came. It was unknown whether he rode the wind or the sword. He floated in the air like a real immortal. The immortal master in white fell quickly and landed on the ground. After taking 5 or 6 steps lightly, he walked to the front of the two people and raised his palms to them with a smile. The young Taoist priest and the bearded swordsman were stunned and could not believe it. The young Taoist priest rubbed his eyes and then a smile appeared in his clear eyes. The young Taoist priest and the bearded swordsman each stretched out a palm and hit the young immortal master's palm heavily. There was no more depression on their faces. The two of them were in high spirits and were very happy. Chen Pinggan looked at the two people. At this moment, his eyes were brighter than Pei Qian's eyes. He held the hands of the two friends and laughed. I knew it. In the world, only my two friends, Zhong Shanfeng and Xu Yuanxia, are willing to do such a thankless thing. 2. (375) A Chi refinement warrior in his early 30s was standing on a huge rock. His face was covered in dust and he spat out a mouthful of blood. The battle had been full of accidents. After the battle, he had to discuss with the others and ask for more money from the earth deity of the golden core stage. The heavenly materials and earthly treasures of an earth bull were all taken away by him, such as the golden core, the horns, the bones, and so on. The rest of them only took some of the internal organs and flesh. In the end, they had to fight 2 more battles. If they were not willing to pay more money, then don't blame them for cursing behind their backs. The Chi refinement warrior's name was LV Yangzhen. He was born in the countryside and had been a woodcutter for generations. Now, he was a cultivator of the mountains and lakes without a fixed residence. Last year, he had just crossed the first threshold and became a Chi refinement warrior of the cave-dwelling stage. Although he was at the bottom of the 5 middle levels, becoming a cultivator of the cave-dwelling stage was like reaching the sky in a single step for an itinerant cultivator. After this step, he could work in a residence of an immortal with an orthodox inheritance, be a consecrator for an emperor in the secular imperial court, and be a guest in the residence of a noble. In other words, a cultivator of the cave-dwelling stage was finally worth something. LV Yangzhen's dream was to be luckier than the cultivator's bones and relics he encountered in the cliff cave. He wanted to obtain a Daoist book that could lead him to the earth deity stage. Even if he could not become a high and mighty earth deity of the golden core stage, he would be satisfied if he could stand outside the door and touch the threshold of the earth deity stage. LV Yangzhen's greatest wish, or rather, his extravagant hope, was that he, who was almost 60 years old, would be lucky enough to become a sword cultivator who had nurtured a natal flying sword. Therefore, when LV Yangzhen saw 2 rays of light flashing back to the crimson wine pot on his waist after the young immortal master in white landed on the ground, his eyes immediately turned red. A flying sword. It was definitely a natal flying sword. Didn't they say that a sword cultivator of 100 years was still young after being in a cave dwelling for 60 years? Could it be that the person in front of him was a great cultivator who could retain his looks? If he was a sword cultivator of the Dragon Gate realm, it would be a huge problem. If he was a sword cultivator of the Golden Core stage who had been in seclusion, there would be heavy casualties in this meticulous plan. LV Yangzhen quickly calmed down after a short period of emotional turmoil. A young sword cultivator who had cultivated a natal flying sword, who could withstand the astral wind of the world, and who was tempered by baleful chi, was not only terrifying, such as his shocking killing power, but what made these rogue cultivators even more fearful was that almost all sword cultivators in the Aquarius continent were the treasures of the immortal sects on the mountain. Whoever dared to hurt them would definitely alert the ancestral halls of their respective sects. LV Yangzhen glanced around from the corner of his eyes. Apart from the Golden Core Earth Immortal who had used a camouflage technique to conceal his true appearance, no one could see any changes in his expression. The rest of the unaffiliated cultivators who were exactly the same as Lu Yangzhen had the same mentality as Lu Yangzhen, except that some of them were even more timid and knew how to act according to the situation. They had already put away their weapons to show their friendliness to the sword cultivator, in case the uninvited guest picked up a soft persimmon and killed them with one strike as a demonstration. There were also some who were not afraid of being stuffed to death. They hid their burning gazes, but some of the little tricks that LV Yangzhen figured out revealed his true thoughts. He would deal with them together with the Earth Bull and make a shocking deal, which was enough to make everyone on the scene rich overnight. At most, they would stay away from the Qinghuan kingdom. They were rogue cultivators who were regarded as wild dogs by the immortals on the mountain. They were originally rootless duckweeds. Besides, even if the sky fell, there were still tall people to hold it up. Therefore, LV Yangzhen and the others subconsciously glanced at the Golden Core Earth Immortal a few times. The origin of this master was unknown. Half a year ago, he had roped them in and roughly explained that there was a great monster of the Earthbull species in this place. It had been hiding in a broken dragon vein with a long history for more than 200 years. It had accumulated the cultivation of the Dragon Gate realm, which was equivalent to that of a Chi cultivator. Once it broke through to the Golden Core realm and formed its gold core, the Qinghuan kingdom would inevitably usher in a world-shaking tragedy. At that time, There would be countless casualties in the several counties and cities within a radius of 1,000 li. Therefore, it had to be suppressed and killed before it formed its gold core, so as to prevent it from bringing disaster to the country. LV Yangzhen and the other two unaffiliated cultivators who had temporarily formed a group to travel and search for treasures would have laughed out loud after hearing this righteous reason if they were not afraid of this person's cultivation of the Golden Core realm. The reason why he had temporarily formed an alliance with the other two and traveled together to Qinghuan and Qingshan was because one of the siblings was a rare earthly cultivator. At this moment, the brother and sister had already quietly drawn closer to him. This time, LV Yangzhen and the female cultivator had contributed greatly to being able to get a share of the Golden Core cultivator's dish. LV Yangzhen was skilled in formations and was able to suppress the commotion caused by the Earthball's backflip, so as to avoid attracting the attention of the orthodox immortals. In the end, they had been busy for half a day, fighting to the death with a beast, but in the end, they had to work for someone else. The female cultivator's proficiency in techniques was an important prerequisite for the Golden Core Earth Immortal to be willing to recruit the three of them. This immortal had only roughly circled the hiding place of the Earthball. As for the specific location, he was still unable to find it. Therefore, this female cultivator who did not know how to fight came in handy. The woman was dressed in bright clothes and looked like a married woman. She was a 5th realm Qi cultivator. Her talent could not be considered good, but among the unaffiliated cultivators, she was not bad. She had a good impression of LV Yangzhen. This time, she had participated in the scheme of a Golden Core Earth Immortal. At the very least, the two siblings and LV Yangzhen could be considered honest with each other. Using the ripples in her heart, she quietly asked, "He has come with ill intentions. He's clearly a friend of those two. What should we do?" LV Yangzhen wiped his face. "Let's wait and see." The woman nodded. In this encirclement, she could be considered the most detached. After the curtains to the battle had been raised, she was even more leisurely than her brother and LV Yangzhen. It could even be said that she had nothing to do. This was because she was an earthly scholar from a side branch of the school of Yin-Yang. The woman's brother was a muscular man of 8 feet. He held a broad axe in his hand and wore a set of green armor engraved with many talisman characters. His face was covered in blood, but fortunately, they were all external injuries that left his skin open. By chance, he had taken the path of a military cultivator, but it was only in appearance. He had only obtained a lost secret manual from a third-rate immortal that refined the body and consolidated the spirit. Coupled with the fact that he had spent all his wealth in his early years to purchase this set of spiritual armor, he was like a tiger that had grown wings. He was rather famous around the borders of the kingdom of Qingshan. However, the one who was truly making money was not this muscular man in armor with impressive battle prowess, but his earthly scholar sister. The Qi practitioners in the mountains, especially those who did not have a teacher or sect, had a great deal of knowledge when it came to finding treasures. Other than the so-called chance of the great path that they had stumbled upon, they could also find clues from the local county records. In addition, there were maps hidden in the yamen. They needed to examine them on the spot and ask the local woodcutters, fishermen, and other common people who often traveled mountains and rivers. Only then could they find a chance to make a fortune. This required the help of magistrates and earthly scholars to open up the mountains and ask for directions. Magistrates were rumored to be able to see the face of the world clearly. They could use the stars to divine the fate of people and the fate of countries. Earthly scholars were skilled at finding dragon points. They were particularly sensitive to the minute changes in spiritual qi. Once they found it, they would have to pass through a hurdle. The heavenly treasures of the world were often closely guarded by ghosts and spirits. This had always been the most fatal obstacle for the earthly cultivators. Independent cultivators often traveled alone. They were not like those mountain sects with immortal dwellings. Once they found a location like this, they could move out in full force. If they really could not, they would find 1 or 2 immortals with whom they were friends, so it was very rare for them to fail. Once the independent cultivators were certain that they could not obtain the treasures by themselves, they could only find a partner. As for why they did not find the immortal sects on the mountain, Wouldn't the chances of success be higher? Firstly, the benefits were too small. They were clearly the first to discover the heavenly treasures and ancient treasures, but they could easily end up with leftovers. Furthermore, there was an even more tragic ending, which was to be secretly killed by the immortal dwellings. One had to know that independent cultivators had always been despised and hated by orthodox immortal masters. They were lonely souls and wild ghosts among the chi cultivators, vermin of the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, unscrupulous cultivators of the evil path. Why did the Jade Raw Realm Cultivator Senior in the history of Tail Ferry have such a high reputation among the independent cultivators of the Aquarius continent? It was because this senior had once spoken out the hearts of thousands of independent cultivators. I just want to stand and eat my fill. The names were recorded, one was in the sect's ancestral hall, and the other was in a certain imperial court near the mountain gate. This kind of chi cultivator was known as the Immortal Master of Records. If they were not listed, they would be considered as independent cultivators. The imperial court and local officials did not like this kind of independent cultivators. They were fickle and easily caused trouble. They were erratic and often had to clean up their messes. In particular, the independent cultivators who had reached the middle 5 states were almost all decisive in killing. They were ruthless people who had forcefully opened a path in countless bloody storms. They were temperamental and did not care about worldly affairs. When they walked in the human world, they did things without scruples. However, it was certainly an exaggeration to say that all the independent cultivators were desperados who did not care about human life at all. It was just that the immortals on the mountain, the imperial court, and the righteous sects in the Jianghu were also exaggerated. Therefore, year after year, the independent cultivators were like rats crossing the street. The independent cultivators who had some strength would ask for an identity from a certain imperial court, or get an identity that was very fake in a certain sect on the mountain. They would travel in the mountains under the name of the Immortal Master of Records. LV Yangzhen's group of 3, because one of them was a formation master who was not good at attacking, one of them was a military cultivator who focused on defense, and one of them was a land warrior who did not even have the strength to truss a chicken. They were quite steady. However, there was another group of 7 or 8 people. When they looked at the young immortal master, besides the implicit judgment of judging the situation, there was also a trace of ruthlessness in their eyes. Most of the people in this group were familiar with each other. They were unfamiliar chi trainers in the territory near the Qinghuan kingdom. Most of them took advantage of the excitement of the water and land Taoist field and the heavenly grand ritual to try their luck. This time, they contributed a lot to the encirclement of the earth bull monster. There were military cultivators who were good at close combat, unorthodox Taoists who were proficient in talisman puppets, ghost cultivators who used a soul-summoning banner, and a strong man whose natal item was actually 3 rattan tokens, a tulip token, and an iron talisman shield. He was responsible for defending his companions who could not dodge in time. There was an old sword cultivator who was still in the 5th state. After leaving the aperture acupoint, his flying sword condensed into a substance. It was completely black, more than 2 feet long, wrapped in wind and thunder, and had a strong smell of blood. Because he had not entered the cave-dwelling realm and really opened up a mansion, his Reiki was not enough to support the flying sword for too long. Usually, he would return to his natal aperture acupoint to be nourished after a successful attack. He would spend a lot of money to replenish the Reiki of his aperture acupoint and wait for the next attack. Half of the fatal wounds on the yellow earth ball were caused by the flying sword of this old sword cultivator. The leader of this group was an old man in a black robe. His mount was a huge black fox with 5 tails. The old man turned his head and looked at the Jindan cultivator who was hiding his head and tail. His meaning was very simple. You are the guy who used the Reiki to exchange for the treasures of the earth ball monster. Previously, everyone had put in a lot of effort and did what should be done. Now, a sword cultivator with unknown origins came to cause trouble. You have the final say on whether to fight or to retreat. If you want to fight to the death and provoke this young sword cultivator, the reward will not be the small amount of money before. If you want to retreat, anyway, you have already paid the deposit before, so the two sides went their separate ways. The Jindan cultivator who was hovering in the air with the wind did not use telepathy to inform the 20 or so individual cultivators. The Earth Immortal, whose face was covered by the mist of mountains and rivers, looked at the white-robed young man and directly said, "Do you really want to cut off people's path to wealth? I can promise you that as long as you are willing to withdraw from the call and not interfere in this matter, I will take 10% of the treasures that should belong to me from this yellow earth ball and convert it into Reiki. After the matter, I will personally hand it over with both hands." After Zhong Shanfeng and Xu Yuanxia's explanation, Chen Pinggan already knew the general reason of the matter. The yellow earth ball in the pool of blood behind him was a monster of the earth ball species in the world. It was born with a gentle temperament. The so-called earth ball turning over in the marketplace had nothing to do with it. It had been hiding here for more than 200 years because it wanted to repair the broken ancient dragon's vein and use it as a place to open a mansion in the future. For so many years, it had been lying in its true form. Its body was like a mountain range, piled up with mountain rocks, and the mountain had long been covered with lush trees. The real earth ball turning over was the turtle fish, mole cricket, earthworms, and giant frogs hibernating underground. These mountain spirits and water monsters liked to be quiet and did not like to move. With their innate talent, they liked to connect their huge bodies with the roots of the mountain and slowly absorb the spiritual energy of the earth. They were afraid of spring thunder. Once they reached the cave-dwelling realm of the middle 5 realms, or when they formed the golden core, they needed to swallow the spiritual energy of the world. Because they had been hiding underground all year long and nibbling away at the luck of the mountain roots, once they broke through, it involved the opportunity of the great Tao. Their nature would often burst forth and their ferocious nature would be revealed. Therefore, there was the saying of the earth ball turning over, and the turtle fish turning over, which led to many tragedies of earthquakes. Zhong Shanfeng and Xu Yuanxia were previously the targets of recruitment. However, although Zhong Shanfeng's cultivation was not high, he was proficient in the origins of many mountain spirits and ghosts. He was also very familiar with the roots and nature of the yellow earth ball, so he rejected the other party's invitation. The real tricky part was that Zhong Shanfeng knew that once the yellow earth ball was really in the Dragon Gate realm, it was only one step away from the core formation realm. If it was besieged and attacked, even a clay bodhisattva would be angry. Even an honest person would burst forth with blood and qi, let alone a monster. Therefore, Zhong Shanfeng was afraid that when the earth ball was on the verge of death, it would affect the earth veins. If that happened, it would really be a huge earth ball turning over. Within a radius of 1,000 miles, it would be affected by the earthquake. The 2 counties closest to this place might have tens of thousands of innocent people killed or injured. Xu Yuanxia had traveled extensively and was relatively experienced. Therefore, she did not speak out for the rogue cultivators and wild cultivators to directly give up on besieging the earth ball. Instead, she told them in detail about the possibility and danger of the earth ball turning over. She hoped that one of the cave realm cultivators who recruited the 2 of them at that time could pass a message to the person behind the scenes to spend a little money to hire and win over a few array masters to minimize the impact of the earth ball turning over. At the very least, it would not cause tens of thousands of people to lose their homes and become homeless. At that time, the cave realm chi cultivator patted his chest and promised that he would pass on the message. At that time, Xu Yuanxia pretended to be naive and honest and exchanged some polite greetings with the cultivator. After that, she and Zhong Shanfeng secretly followed and investigated. When they discovered that there was only one array master in the camp of the Earth Immortal of Jindan Realm, they knew that this was destined to be a disaster caused by greed. Zhong Shanfeng and Xu Yuanxia discussed and the 2 of them split up. Xu Yuanxia went to the nearest sect on the mountain and told them about this matter. She did not expect those array masters to stop them from becoming enemies with the Earth Immortal of Jindan Realm. Instead, it was to exert pressure on the other party or to make preparations in advance to help suppress the dangerous situation of thousands of miles of tremors. Because Zhong Shanfeng had a proper identity, he could be considered a daoist from a side branch of the Dragon Tiger Mountain of the Central Plains in the Julu continent. Therefore, he went to the government office and found a governor, hoping that the imperial court of the Qingluan kingdom would pay attention to this matter. It would be best if the emperor of the Tang family could send a royal consecrator to this place to supervise. Even if it was to reinforce the Earth Immortal of Jindan realm, it would be fine as a means to win him over. However, it was necessary to set up a few great formations of mountains and rivers around the hiding place of the Yellow Earth Bull. The governor, who held real power in his hands, was easy to talk to. He promised to immediately report this matter to the imperial court and ask for help from the Immortal of Jindan realm on the mountain within his jurisdiction. He would strive to send a message to the capital via flying sword. However, this powerful minister of Qingluan kingdom was quite pragmatic and shrewd. He asked Zhong Shanfeng to hand over 2 valuable items. Otherwise, it would be a false alarm, or he, a foreign Taoist, would make irresponsible remarks. How could he explain it to the Immortal of Jindan realm and His Majesty? Both Zhong Shanfeng and Xu Yuanxia felt that it was reasonable, so they each handed over the Zhenwu magic sword, a short knife obtained in the Battle of Tsai Kingdom. The final result was the current situation. It didn't make sense. It seemed to be the most natural principle for individual cultivators to seek profit. Just like the 4 words that the Jindan realm cultivator said directly, cutting off people's way of making money was a behavior that angered both men and gods among the cultivators in the mountains and lakes. As for this group of chi trainers who got up early to seek profit, of course, they also had their own justifiable arguments. In this remote and secluded place, they besieged a monster. They didn't kill people in the market, nor did they use immortals' spells and immortals' weapons to harm people. Even the Immortal of Jindan realm who searched for treasures was just like this. What else could they do if they wanted to make money in such a clean way? You are a young Taoist without hair on your mouth, plus a Jianghu warrior who has a lot of beard. You said that this Yellow Earth Bull would affect the ley lines and cause earthquakes thousands of miles away. Who do you think you are? After that, they sneaked all the way here. They saw with their own eyes that the Yellow Earth Bull, which was as big as a mountain, shook off countless stones and trees on its back. The Yellow Earth Bull, which was as big as a mountain, confronted more than 20 chi trainers. At first, the Yellow Earth Bull wanted to escape. It fought and retreated, but it was still miserably chased. Only then did it start to fight back. Both sides fought fiercely. Zhong Shanfeng and Xu Yuanxia could only protect in front of the Yellow Earth Bull. When it was seriously injured, it had no choice but to reveal its true life form, which was the size of a buffalo. If it fought with its life, it would really be irreversible. However, for some reason, the monster lying in a pool of blood saw that the 2 of them did not attack it, but instead risked their lives to save it. The monster struggled in its mind for a while. Although it was clear what the 2 of them were thinking, they were probably afraid that it would trigger an earthquake, causing the mountains to collapse and the earth to crack for thousands of miles. However, it did not do that in the end and allowed its life to flow away. Chen Pinggan looked at Zhong Shanfeng and Xu Yuanxia. The group of chi trainers should be confident that they would win. They didn't kill the 2 of them. The young Taoist suffered some external injuries. However, his shoulder was pierced by the sword cultivator's flying sword. He was bleeding non-stop. After applying medicine, the effect was not good. He should have hurt his muscles and bones. After all, it was a life flying sword. It was definitely not as simple as the word sharp. The bearded warrior's beard was stained with blood. Many parts of his beard were knotted together. It looked a little funny. At that moment, the golden core cultivator took a step back. Zhong Shanfeng was worried that Chen Pinggan would agree immediately. He grabbed the latter's arm and said anxiously, "We can't do that." The golden core cultivator smiled and said, "Now that the demon has already resigned itself to death and shows no signs of struggling for its life. You 2 righteous men and this immortal master who has just arrived, why do you have to make unnecessary moves and kill each other?" Xu Yuanxia could no longer support herself. She sat on the ground with a black face. She supported herself with her saber and wiped her beard with the other. "That's the logic. It's just that I feel a little aggrieved." The bearded man turned and glanced at the Yellow Earth Bull. "I feel that I've let it down." Zhong Shanfeng sighed and kept his peachwood sword behind his back. He released his hand that was holding Chen Pingan's arm and said helplessly, "It seems like that's the only way." However, it was a questioning tone. In fact, everyone, including the golden core cultivator, had long noticed the 4 retainers of the young sword cultivator. They were all pure martial artists with shocking auras. They believed that this was the real reason why they had been biding their time and talking nicely. Chen Pingan patted Zhong Shanfeng's shoulder. "I'll take care of it." Zhong Shanfeng was stunned for a moment. He grinned and said, "No matter what you do, the 2 of us have no objections. We won't make things difficult for you." "Really?" Chen Pingan nodded. He turned and looked at the golden core earth immortal who was riding the wind in the air. He asked with a smile, "I wonder which mountain immortal house you came from, or that Qinghuan country's governor's office." Xu Yuanxia, who was sitting cross-legged, smiled knowingly. "Ayo, Chen Pingan, this brat's mind has become much more active now." He immediately pointed out the direction of her conjecture. "It's a pity that his martial arts realm doesn't seem to have advanced a single step." "Still the same 3 realms? That's normal. It's only been 2 years since the last time they parted." "How old is Chen Pingan now?" 17 years old. Now that he has such a good foundation in the 3 realms, it can be considered pretty good. He doesn't need to feel guilty about obtaining the title of martial arts genius in the Jianghu. Outside of the 3 people, there was a circle of tigers, leopards, jackals, and wolves. The 4 people on the picture scrolled to the right of Wei Xian, and Sui did not walk into the circle to Chen Pingan's side. Instead, they stood further away from the circle. Could it be that these 4 people, who are purely martial artists, want to surround the 20 or so chi cultivators? That golden core cultivator smiled. "Who I am has nothing to do with your decision, little immortal teacher." Chen Pingan asked, "This yellow earth ball, in your opinion, how much snow is it worth?" The golden core cultivator thought for a moment and answered seriously, "The market price is about 20 to 30 small snow coins. However, earth balls are extremely hard to find. There's a price but no market. Therefore, it's fair to double the real price. According to this calculation, it's roughly 5,000 snow coins. Why, little immortal teacher, do you want to calculate how many snow coins are you going to spend on your 10%? Or do you feel that 10% is too little and is not worthy of your strength? Do you want 20%, or even more?" Although this golden core earth immortal's words had a hint of laughter in them, the sinister intent within could be heard by all the cultivators present. This was the prelude to a falling out. A golden core earth immortal imperceptibly exuded a majestic aura. Even the black-robed old man riding the black fox great demon felt somewhat suffocated. As long as one became a golden core expert, one could borrow strength from the heaven and earth. Although you guys are unreasonable, it's actually my 2 friends who created the current situation. However, no matter what the reason is, it's fortunate that the situation didn't reach the worst step and the earth ball didn't flip over and cause the earth to shake for 1,000 miles. Therefore, we can discuss it properly now. Chen Pingan smiled. "All right. This yellow earth ball that you guys are determined to get, we'll calculate it according to your price of 50 small snow coins. After deducting my 10%, here's 45 small snow coins. Take it." Everyone watched as the white-robed immortal cultivator threw a large handful of small snow coins towards the golden core earth immortal who was quite far away. The earth immortal frowned and waved his sleeve. More than 40 small snow coins flowed like a stream and circled around him, preventing them from actually getting close to him. Then, he looked at them one by one with rapt attention. There was no tampering with the divine coins, and they were genuine snow coins. LV Yangzhen and all the other independent cultivators were jealous and suspicious. How could there be such a business in the world? The golden core earth immortal cultivator didn't immediately put away the small snow coins. It was equivalent to 4,500,000 taels of silver in the secular dynasty. Not to mention the Qingluan kingdom, which was known for its wealth in the southeast of the Aquarius continent, just the Qingshan kingdom. How much did the imperial court's annual tax revenue amount? Therefore, this was a huge fortune. Even an earth immortal like him didn't think it was a dispensable income. The Earth Immortal continued to observe the slowly flowing divine coins as he asked, "May I ask this young master, where is your home of immortals?" Chen Pingan smiled and said, "I asked you where you came from before, but you didn't answer me either." The Golden Core Earth Immortal smiled and said, "Then may I ask, young master, why did you spend money to buy this yellow earth ball?" "Senior, you don't have to worry about this." Chen Pingan thought for a while and threw another 5 small snow coins to the Earth Immortal. "Senior, please distribute these 5 to the other immortal masters. Take it as my apology for being late but first served." In this way, the mountain and lake cultivator's eyesight improved a lot. After all, the extra 5 pieces of small summer money were equivalent to taking it for free. There were more than 20 Chi refinement warriors, and there were actually 4 mountains of different sizes. LV Yangzhen and the other 2 were on the smallest mountain, while the group of people led by the old man in the black robe riding on the fox was on the largest mountain. They were the most outstanding in terms of both numbers and strength. Therefore, they might be able to take away 2 of the 5 pieces of small summer money. The Golden Core Earth Immortal smiled and said, "Young master, you're really bold and wealthy. You can give away the small snow coins as if they were snow. Even I am ashamed of my inferiority." As soon as he said that, some of the wild cultivators began to have thoughts again. Indeed, the Earth Immortal's words were too harsh. Wild cultivators like them had their heads tied to their belts and risked their lives to earn money. How many small snow coins could they earn in a year? Now that I've said the good words and done the good deed, it's time for me to talk about something more practical. Chen Pingan looked around and said indifferently, "Money doesn't just fall from the sky. I do have some small snow coins with me. If you're interested, you can take them with your own abilities. But if you can't take them away, then I'll take your lives." The Golden Core Earth Immortal suddenly put away the 50 small snow coins and asked with a smile, "Aren't you worried that I'll just walk away? I can't carry a yellow earth ball and parade it through the streets, but with 50 small snow coins, I can come and go as I please." The Golden Core Earth Immortal asked again, "Aren't you afraid that I'll buy your lives with the 50 small snow coins I've already got? Everyone, including me, earned twice the amount of money. Why not?" Chen Pingan stretched out a hand, "Just walk and buy as much as you want. As long as you're happy. I've been annoyed with you for a long time. Please run away or commit murder so that I can kill you." The Golden Core Earth Immortal was silent, as if he was weighing the pros and cons. All the wild cultivators were waiting for the Golden Core Earth Immortal's decision. At this moment, the severely injured yellow earth bull spoke in human language and looked at the back of the snow-white robe. "Immortal Master, why do you have to do this?" Chen Pingan did not turn around. He reached out to hold the blade-strengthening gourd at his waist and said softly, "I think you're more human than most people. It's that simple. From now on, I hope you can continue to cultivate well. In the future, there will be another kind Golden Core Earth Immortal." 6. 376. The Jindan cultivator suddenly laughed, "So you're from the legalism school, no wonder." Chen Pingan did not know why he misunderstood. The Earth Immortal, who should be familiar with the world of Qinghuan, smiled and said, "Then it's time to learn from each other." The atmosphere in the valley suddenly became tense. The wild cultivators were used to the scene of falling out with each other. People die for wealth and birds die for food. Who would not be willing to earn an extra 50 small coins? If they could earn clean money, of course they would earn it. When had they ever earned dirty money? For those itinerant cultivators who were recruited by the imperial court, or those who asked for the title of Reverend of Immortal Fuji, the stepping stone to help them ask for the amulet was most likely to do some shady business first, such as helping the imperial court to assassinate the generals and ministers of the enemy states, or helping Immortal Fuji to solve the grudges and vendettas that were not suitable for him to do personally. The Earth Immortal looked around leisurely, as if he was inspecting the battlefield. Chen Pingan asked, "Do you know that once a bull chooses to turn over, it will affect the earth veins and bring disaster to tens of thousands of people?" The Earth Immortal hesitated for a moment, but still nodded and said frankly, "At my level, of course I know this." The wild cultivators were not too surprised about this. Only the formation master Lu Yongzhen frowned, but he hid it very well. Chen Pinggan asked again, "Then can you control the earthquake?" The Earth Immortal did not give an answer directly, but smiled and said, "This is not easy. Either according to your friend, by burning money, we can set up a large-scale array to stabilize the earth veins and reduce the earthquake, or we need a qi cultivator to have a natural spiritual treasure similar to the pearl and refine it into a natal item to stabilize the earth veins." Seeing that Chen Pinggan did not ask any more questions, the Earth Immortal looked at Chen Pinggan carefully again. "See you later." The Jindan cultivator seemed to have given up on the idea of learning from each other. He looked at the backbone of the few rogue cultivators, such as the black-robed old man who rode the five-tailed black fox and the formation master Lu Yongzhen. They told each other the location of the loot distribution through telepathy, paid the rest of the payment, and then flew away. All the individual cultivators left with the Earth Immortal, but the direction was slightly different. Presumably, the Jindan cultivator would pay the immortal coins to the four groups at different times and places, so as to avoid the unequal distribution of the immortal coins. Zhong Shanfeng lightly punched Chen Pinggan and joked, "Not bad. You're treating the summer money like snow." Xu Yuanxia has already stood up, sheathed her saber and combed her blood-stained beard with her fingers. "We're safe for now. I'm just afraid that this Jindan Earth Immortal is a local snake with bad intentions. If we can't handle it, we shouldn't wait for the debate between Buddhism and Taoism in the capital of Qingyuan Kingdom. We should leave as soon as possible." Zhong Shanfeng hesitated. "Chen Pinggan lent me the True Force sword and that dagger of yours. Don't tell me you're going to leave them in the governor's estate." Chen Pinggan corrected. "I'm not lending them." Although Xu Yuanxia's heart ached, she still looked determined. "Such a big governor's estate doesn't have legs. We'll have a chance to get it back in the future. If the governor's estate is the mastermind of this siege, we'll be walking into a trap. The emperor of Qingyuan Kingdom has always been arrogant and unruly, and the governor is the emperor's confidant. We'll easily become the target of public criticism. Moreover, we won't be able to defend ourselves." Zhong Shanfeng used to be a stubborn person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have abandoned Confucianism and become a Taoist priest in the mountains. This time, he traveled south from the North Continent and traveled to the Aquarius continent. He had seen a lot and gained a lot. After listening to Xu Yuanxia's explanation, he no longer insisted on his opinion. Chen Pinggan pondered for a long time before he came up with a reasonable explanation. It could not only prevent Zhong Shanfeng and Xu Yuanxia from being involved in his treacherous affairs, but also allow them to go to the governor's estate without worry. "I had a chance encounter in an academy in the Tongye continent and obtained a jade pendant. It can be used to save our lives at a critical moment. Although Qingyuan Kingdom is filled with all kinds of people and we can't let our guard down, but with that jade pendant, it's equivalent to the academy's gentleman's presence. Ordinary Jindan and Yuanian cultivators wouldn't dare to kill us. Therefore, it shouldn't be a problem for us to take back the True Force sword and the dagger." Treating people with sincerity was indeed important. However, if one were to put people in danger because of this and encounter a calamity similar to Chen Pinggan's encounter with Du Mao, then it wouldn't be sincerity. It would be heartless and ignorant of worldly affairs. Pei Qian and the other four people had already approached. They were very curious about the identity of the young Daoist priest and the bearded ranger. It seemed that they weren't from Chen Pinggan's hometown, but were friends that he met on his travels. The four of them could see that the young Daoist priest was only a qi cultivator of an ordinary realm, while the bearded swordsman was a martial artist of the fifth realm with a decent foundation. Was that all? Pei Qian had been secretly sizing up the two people. At this moment, she was holding a walking stick in her hand and the bamboo blade and sword made by Chen Pinggan were hanging from her waist. She stood beside Chen Pinggan and smiled. "Hello Daoist brother, hello Uncle Swordsman. I'm Pei Qian, my master's first disciple." Xu Yuanxia laughed heartily. She had gained seniority for nothing. Although Zhong Shanfeng's shoulder had been pierced by the sword cultivator's life-bound flying sword, his face was still somewhat pale after applying the wound medicine. However, seeing this skinny girl who claimed to be Chen Pingan's first disciple, the young Daoist priest's lips curled up. He smiled and greeted the little girl. "Hello, Pei Qian. How old are you?" Pei Qian smiled and said, "I'm only 7 years old. That's why I'm only this tall." Chen Pingan gave her a chestnut. Pei Qian, who was willing to suffer for her pride, immediately said with a sad face, "I'm actually 11 years old." Chen Pingan turned around and squatted down. He turned to look at Xu Yuanxia. "You're so heavily injured. What should we do?" Xu Yuanxia and Zhong Shanfeng squatted down together. The bearded man stroked his beard and muttered, "Let's not talk about that sneaky earth immortal Jindan. Let's just talk about that group of wild cultivators riding the black fox. They have bad temperaments. If we leave Earthox alone, we'll die sooner or later. What you said earlier was true. No one's money falls from the sky or is blown by the wind. Let's send Buddha to the west and let it follow us in its true form for the time being. When its injuries are better, we'll find a place where it can hide and it won't be too late to separate. However, in this way, Chen Pingan, the burden on your shoulders will be heavier." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "How long has it been since we last met? You're already treating me as an outsider." Xu Yuanxia laughed and said, "It's not like you're spending my money to be polite." Pei Qian was like a chick pecking at rice. She deeply agreed. It really didn't cost her money to be polite and flattering. This bearded uncle could be considered as her kindred spirit. Compared to Pei Qian, the 4 people in the picture scroll saw more and thought further. The 4 people on Wei Xian's right and Sui Xiong's right had never seen Chen Pingan ask for other people's opinions. Moreover, he naturally listened to them. It should be known that along the way, the 4 of them had fought and killed many times. Sui Xiong's right had died many times. Chen Pingan's various performances had unknowingly displayed an extremely tough, tenacious, and opinionated side. However, at the same time, he had given sufficient respect to the 4 people. Even Wei Xian had to admit that the so-called overlord's potential that he had flattered Chen Pingan was actually not a big exaggeration. If it was during the chaotic times of the Lotus Blossom Blessed Land, perhaps Chen Pingan would be his opponent on the battlefield. Chen Pingan looked at the yellow earth ox and said, "Can you appear in human form? If I remember correctly, after reaching the Sea Viewing Realm or the Dragon Gate Realm, you should be able to transform into human form, right? I have a bottle of healing pills. If you consume it in human form, the effect will be even better." Before leaving Old Dragon City, Madame Gui had sent someone to bring a treasure chest made of cinnamon wood. There were 12 bottles of pills inside. She did not spend a lot of money. Every bottle was needed by an Earth Immortal. Instead, it was the most cost-effective for each step of the middle 5 realms. After hearing Chen Pingan's question, the Dragon Gate Realm monster that had injured its Dao foundation shook its head. Zhong Shanfeng explained, "Compared to ordinary mountain spirits and water monsters, it is more special. Just like a water dragon, the purer the 5 elements, the harder it is to transform into human form. For example, it needs to reach the Golden Elixir realm." Chen Pingan suddenly understood and nodded, "It's okay. This time, when we go to the Governor General's manor, we will try our best to avoid the big cities and choose the scenic paths." Zhong Shanfeng smiled and said, "We are familiar with this. In these 2 years, we have visited many places in Qingwan and Qingshan Kingdom." After Chen Pingan took out a pill that was suitable for qi cultivators of the Dragon Gate realm, the yellow earth ox could already struggle to get up after consuming it for half an hour. Although it was still covered in wounds, it could walk without hindrance. After all, the earth monster in the world was known for its tough physique and amazing endurance. Furthermore, the Dragon Gate monster had confessed that it had refined a green glazed landscape vase as one of its natal items. It could store the spiritual qi of the world. Chen Pingan knew what it meant, so he directly gave all the pills in the vase to the yellow bull. He allowed it to store them in its natal green glazed vase and slowly absorb the medicinal qi to heal its injuries. After the yellow earth ox stepped on the ground, its eyes were actually filled with tears as it stared at the young man in a snow-white robe in front of it. "Immortal Master Gao Feng, how do you repay me?" It said guiltily and uneasily, "I have been cultivating here for more than 200 years. I only took a fancy to the dragon vein here. Previously, I obtained 2 spirit weapons and Dharma treasures by chance and have already refined them into my natal items. Other than that, I did not plunder any other treasures of heaven and earth. Immortal Master has saved my life and even continued my Tao." Pei Qian sighed. It was all my fault. How come he had just left Old Dragon City and he had already become a loser? At B-Tail Ferry, it almost lost 2 snowflakes. At this coal, it was even more of a loss. Chen Pinggan said with a smile, "It's okay. If you really want to, after your injuries have healed and formed your golden core, you can travel around as a human. In the future, you can go to my hometown. The scenery there is beautiful and the spiritual qi is abundant. You are welcome to be a guest." When Chen Pinggan said this, Xu Yuanxia said with deep meaning, "Why wait until you form your golden core? After your injuries have healed, you can go directly to your hometown. Maybe you can form your golden core there. With the saint overseeing the destiny, you don't have to worry about the earth ox turning over." The yellow earth ox's eyes were confused and seemed to be puzzled. Chen Pinggan carefully considered whether this was feasible or not. Xu Yuanxia already said with a smile, "No hurry. We can still walk a long distance. Let's see if your temperament is right before making a decision. If your temperament is not right, it's better to leave a good impression. If we are fated to meet again in the future, it's better than being together all the time and then having a bad relationship. A good relationship would be wasted." Zhong Shanfeng said in agreement, "It's feasible." Chen Pinggan had no objection. The group walked slowly and left the valley, heading towards the famous governor's office in Qingwan Kingdom. Chen Pinggan, Zhong Shanfeng, and Xu Yuanxia talked about some of their travels. The 2 of them also told Chen Pinggan about their Jianghu stories after they parted ways at Qingfu Square. The royal family of the Tang family of Qingwan Kingdom had always been titled as kings but not vassals. The princes and princesses all stayed in the capital and had their own mansions. Moreover, these mansions only had the right to live but not ownership. Once they lost their titles, they would be taken back by the imperial clan court. There were 5 governors' offices in Qingwan Kingdom. Other than the 4 borderlands and 4 mansions, there was another one in the central region. It had great power and was in charge of transportation, salt, and iron, as well as many other vital affairs of the country. Ordinary monarchs were afraid of the danger of having a powerful official in their hands and the worry of having a separate government. In the hundreds of years of Qingwan Kingdom's history, the country was prosperous and the people were at peace. Moreover, it had always been a performance that outsiders couldn't understand even if they cracked their heads. Could it be that none of the high officials of the border who were far away from the emperor had ever had any ambition? Each and every one of them was conscientious in their duties and worked hard for the emperor of the Tang family until they died. No matter what, the Qingwan Kingdom located in the southeast of the Aquarius continent was like a paradise, a pure land. Especially after the war in the central region was in full swing, it caused many scholars to move south and abandon the north. The 3 countries of Qingwan, Qingshan, and Yunxiao absorbed tens of thousands of descendants of powerful families who moved south. Among them, the Qingwan Kingdom had the most people. Of the current 5 governors of Qingwan Kingdom, the 4 closest to the border all relied on their military exploits on the battlefield or their status as relatives. Only the governor's office in the middle had always been surnamed Wei. The current owner relied on the inheritance of his ancestors and passed it down from generation to generation. Moreover, for the past 300 years, the family's bloodline had always been supported by a single seedling. It seemed to be on the verge of collapse, but it just didn't fall. It had been an iron crop governor for over 300 years. The current governor Wei, the one who had asked Zhong Shanfeng and Xu Yuanxia for the Zhenwu sword and dagger, after the inheritance was passed down, he no longer traveled around the mountains and rivers. Instead, he lived in seclusion. However, relying on the various deeds and rumors from his early years, his reputation in the 3 countries of Qingwan was not small. He was skilled in Qingzi, cursive writing, annotation of Buddhist scriptures, and painting of Buddha statues. Especially the latter, There was a saying that it was unparalleled for a time. It was difficult to obtain it. Regarding this Governor Wei, who was in the prime of his life, his reputation in the scholarly and literary circles was extremely good. He was praised as having a graceful bearing, a candid and honest person, solemn as the wind at the foot of a pine tree. Among the noble ladies and young ladies of the capital, there were even more favorable comments. It was rumored that when this governor was traveling, he had entered the mountains with several good friends to visit immortals. He was mistaken by a woodcutter as a banished immortal and kowtowed to him, exclaiming that he was an immortal. This time, the capital of Qingyuan Kingdom was holding a large-scale debate between Buddhism and Taoism. Governor Wei would head to the capital to be responsible for the safety of the capital. He was allowed to bring 6,000 elite soldiers up north to be stationed in important areas around the capital. From this, it could be seen how much the emperor of the Tang family relied on and trusted him. It was to the point that there were some groundless rumors in the Jianghu, saying that the ruler and official were homosexual. It should be known that for this debate between Buddhism and Taoism, the two rulers of Yunxiao country and the He family of Qingshan country would both come to the capital of Qingyuan Kingdom. Furthermore, for Governor Wei to bring soldiers up north was something that the two rulers of other countries did not regret. This was even more strange. On this day, a tall and sturdy young man came to visit the governor's manor. He did not disturb any outsiders. Governor Wei Liang was receiving guests in his study. Wei Liang was only 30 years old and had a handsome appearance. Wei Liang was in a high position, but he was very casual with this young man. It was not a slightly distant politeness, nor was it a deliberate warmth. The tall and sturdy young man was clearly an old acquaintance of this governor. He did not sit across from Wei Liang. Instead, he stood under the bookshelf, flipping through things. Wei Liang smiled. "Jiang Yun, it seems that the family favors you and is willing to hand this matter over to you. This way, it will save me a lot of trouble. When the time comes, I will be in the light and you will be in the dark. I trust that this debate between Buddhism and Taoism at the end of spring will not cause too much of a disturbance." The tall and sturdy young man was the one who lived at the end of the small alley at the B-Tail ferry. He had probably left half of his hometown and used a camouflage technique on the metal chain belt that he had refined into his natal item to avoid attracting attention in the city. The young man called Jiang Yun casually flipped through a book. There were many side notes, densely packed. Furthermore, there was a mixture of black ink and red ink. Clearly, Governor Wei Liang had read this book more than once. Jiang Yun turned his head. "Old Wei, you must not let your guard down. Your emperor has made such a big mess. Right now, the situation is very complicated. Other than me, there seems to be other people hiding in the family, and their cultivation is definitely not low." Wei Liang smiled but did not speak. Jiang Yun was somewhat helpless. A tiny Qingyuan kingdom dares to hold a debate between Buddhism and Taoism, and purposely make such a big scene. The emperor of the Tang family does not understand the danger of the conflict between the three religions, but do you not understand? Our Yunlin Jiang family, how did we migrate to the Aquarius continent? This time when I left the B-Tail ferry, I purposely picked some lively places along the way. It is not an exaggeration to say that the streets are now filled with Qi refinement warriors, not to mention your capital. Are you really not afraid? Wei Liang placed a wooden box on the table. After opening it, a cold light filled the room. He took out a literary knife from the wooden box and smiled. "Because of your master, you will have sympathy for the uncultivated cultivators. However, I will not be like that. Before the end of spring, as long as it is an itinerant cultivator with a criminal record, regardless of whether he committed a crime within the borders of Qingyuan Kingdom or elsewhere, I will catch him several times. Whether he is dead or alive, I will act according to the rules. Even a rat's feces can spoil a pot of porridge, let alone a nest of rats that have entered the country." Although the literary knife of an elegant scholar was a small item, it was regarded as the weapon of a gentleman. In the wooden box on the table in front of Wei Liang, there were nearly 10 ancestral literary knives neatly placed. They were roughly divided into two types, the literary knife that had been around for a long time and the paper knife that was used to cut rice paper. The former was also known as the shaving knife. In ancient times, it could only be used to record words on bamboo slips. The small knife that was used to cut bamboo slips was called the literary knife. It was first made of bronze and later made of iron. The various precious materials today were actually more for people to play with and collect. It had already lost its earliest function. At this moment, Wei Liang was holding a knife in each of his hands. It was two paper knives. One was a bamboo yellow paper knife. The scabbard on the table was engraved with the words made by Zhen Song Hall. The other was a white jade 100 refinements knife carved with dragon patterns and gilded with gold. Jiang Yun put the book back and sighed. His expression was complicated. So you set up a trap and killed so many uncultivated cultivators in one go? Those who are unjust are doomed to destruction. It took me quite a bit of effort to deal with those immortal masters on the mountain. It's already a blessing that I didn't directly kill these uncultivated cultivators. Of course, I went through so much trouble because of my selfishness as well. However, quite a few of them had already become the eyes and ears of my estate. They'll be quite useful in the future. Look, this is how simple it is to act according to the rules of the world. As he spoke, Wei Liang never raised his head. He stared at the Gongguan knife with exquisite patterns before gently tapping it with the bamboo carving knife. The sound was crisp and clear. He closed his eyes and listened to it, enjoying it very much. Although Jiang Yun was on rather good terms with Wei Liang, he was still rather annoyed. Don't you care if your methods are righteous or evil? Evil methods are still laws. He opened his eyes and changed the topic calmly. He smiled. Let's not talk about these things that are destined to be a conversation between a chicken and a duck. When I went out this time, I came across a legalist disciple of the same sect as me. He was extremely interesting. His friend even left 2 items in my estate. If you're interested, you can stay for a few more days. (377) They actually found a bamboo hut that had been abandoned for many years by a lake in the mountains. The original appearance of the hut was still vaguely recognizable. Presumably, when it was first built, it was very exquisite. It was most likely built by a rich hermit who liked to fish. The group settled down here, each with their own tasks. Chen Pinggan went to cut 2 slender old bamboo poles, one long and one short. When he returned, Zhu Lian had already lit a bonfire. Chen Pinggan squatted beside the bonfire and slowly smoked the bamboo poles to increase the toughness of the fishing rods. Otherwise, if something big in the water came into contact with light, the bamboo poles would break with a slight tug. Chen Pinggan handed the short bamboo pole to Pei Qian, asking her to learn from him. Inside the bamboo hut, Zhu Lian was exchanging knowledge with the bearded man. The two of them sat a little far away from the others. Zhu Lian seemed to be showing off the immortal book that the old man surnamed Zun gave him. The man and woman fought, sweating profusely. The young Daoist and Lu Baixiang sat on the ground, playing chess. Wei Xian squatted at the side, still waiting for the outcome to be revealed. The yellow earth ox was keeping watch in the forest near the bamboo hut. Facing the beautiful landscape, Sui Yuyu left the bamboo hut while there was no one around. He took off his boots and sat on the edge of the bamboo raft-like foundation. He put his snow-white feet into the water and placed the infatuation sword across his knees. His hands pressed on the 2 ends of the scabbard as he looked into the distance. The fresh air of the mountains refreshed his mind. Chen Pinggan swung the 2 fishing rods a few times to test the size of the arc. Pei Qian stood beside him and imitated him. The 2 of them, one old and one young, came outside the bamboo hut. Chen Pinggan began to tie the fishing line and hook. Pei Qian followed suit, but if she missed some details, Chen Pinggan would help her retie the line and tighten the hook. Then, he took Pei Qian to the lake in the distance and lifted the rocks, looking for a kind of aquatic insect that looked like a mole cricket. In the end, Chen Pinggan did not fish, but let Pei Qian fish alone. He put the long fishing rod into the jade pendant that Zheng Dafeng gave him. Inside the jade pendant, there were not only old but not discarded straw sandals, fishing hooks, fishing lines, and other inconspicuous common goods, but also the slightly more valuable wine that the immortal in the well had brewed. There was also the yellowed parasol leaf, which was said to contain 2 sets of protective formations that originated from Taiping Mountain and Fuyao sect, as well as a large pile of money that the Tongye sect had repaid for the Guyu. Pei Qian was not a patient person by nature, but with Chen Pinggan by his side, plus the fact that he had been copying books and practicing calligraphy for such a long time, he had more or less become impatient. He just stared at the water quietly, wishing that he could drag a big black fish that weighed more than 100 pounds ashore in the next moment. Chen Pinggan was thinking about the 4th style of the mountain-shaking fist manual, which was named Heaven and Earth Stance. It was a boxing stance with a big tone. In addition to the detailed introduction of the operation of genuine qi, the posture of this boxing stance, which combined movement and stillness, was really strange. The 3 realms required the later generations who studied the mountain-shaking fist to practice it upside down, using their palms, fists, and a finger as supporting points, and then walking. As for the Heaven and Earth stance, the book said, "A man of indomitable spirit, who learns my boxing skills, must turn the world upside down with my fists." No wonder the barefoot old man, after reading the mountain-shaking fist manual, said that this boxing stance was mediocre, and that it was useless except for its big tone. Chen Pinggan gently patted the ground, flipped his body gracefully, and used one palm to support the bamboo raft on the ground. When Pei Qian turned her head and saw this scene, she wanted to laugh. Chen Pinggan, who was standing upside down, pointed at the water with his free hand, indicating for Pei Qian to focus on fishing. Pei Qian obediently turned her head. Chen Pinggan changed his palm into a fist, using his fist to support himself, and then using only one finger to support himself, he slightly raised his body. Using the operation of the mountain-shaking fist's genuine qi, from beginning to end, there was no difficulty at all. Chen Pinggan closed his eyes. Aside from using one finger to support himself, 2 fingers of his other hand were pressed together in front of him. Of the 18 stops of sword qi that Alliance had taught him, he was about to break through the final bottleneck between the 12th and 13th stops. Chen Pinggan had originally not been in a hurry. He had only taught Pei Qian the 18 stops in the dusty medicine shop in Old Dragon City. Not long after leaving B-Tail Ferry, Pei Qian had told Chen Pinggan, saying that she had only earned 2 or 3 copper coins. She was a little excited, but didn't think it was anything special. She had already told Chen Pinggan that she could freely circulate her genuine qi up to the 12th stop. This made Chen Pinggan feel a little helpless. He could only continue to remind Pei Qian to avoid being arrogant and impatient, and to be down to earth. Chen Pinggan couldn't help but feel a little anxious, or perhaps worried. If Pei Qian continued to climb the martial path at an astonishing speed, there would be a day when this joking disciple of hers would walk side by side with her master Chen Pinggan. In the future, she would walk further and further away. She would climb high alone and look down on the world. A disciple doesn't have to be inferior to their master. This was what Chen Pinggan had said to Zheng Dafeng. And the student surpasses the master. This was a classic point in Lord Wensheng's persuasion. Chen Pinggan didn't care that Pei Qian's martial path was further and higher than his own. Chen Pinggan, however, was worried that he was Pei Qian's teacher and protector. If Pei Qian went astray one day, what would he do? Just like how the flood dragon that threw the snake gall stone at the young flood dragon indifferently said, "If it's an ill-fated relationship, I'll cut it off with my sword." Could Chen Pinggan do that? Taking a step back, even if he had such a cold heart, at that time, Pei Qian's martial arts would be so high that Chen Pinggan might not be able to catch up to him. How could he cut it off? In the lotus flower-blessed land, under the guidance of the old Taoist of Donghai, they had traveled through thousands of mountains and rivers. Once, as a bystander, they had seen how the friends of gentlemen in the imperial court went from worrying about the country and the people, to worrying about the economy and the people. Step by step, the atmosphere became corrupted. Everyone flaunted themselves as gentlemen. Since they were already gentlemen, how could there be any flaws? As long as a person was demoted in the imperial court, they didn't care about right or wrong. In the imperial court, they were filled with righteous indignation and angrily rebuked their political opponents. Everyone comforted their good friend, broke a willow to send him off, raised a glass of wine to comfort him, and lamented that the human heart was not what it used to be. In the distant literary circles of Jianghu, there would be disciples who would lead the way and write all kinds of erotic or groundless unofficial histories for their political opponents. Since Chen Pinggan had the idea of establishing a school, he had to put an end to this worst situation. If he couldn't even teach Pei Qian, who was closest to him, well, how could Chen Pinggan dare to say that his future school would not be the second Tongyi school thousands of years later? Would he not be the second Du Maro? Learning to be polite and practicing martial arts to strengthen the body. This was Chen Pinggan's original intention for Pei Qian. Under normal circumstances, this was like walking with two legs, stable and not a problem. But the key was that Pei Qian's martial arts talent was too high and her martial arts luck was too high. One day, as long as she felt that the reason in the book was just a chore to deal with Chen Pinggan, and once she felt that it was too annoying and boring to reason with people, she would think that he had boxing skills and a sword at his waist. He followed his heart and didn't care about self-restraint and didn't know how to restrain himself and return to etiquette. In the past, in order to create a Jindan stage great demon who was kind to others, Chen Pinggan spent 50 small rain coins without frowning. In the future, if he personally created a 9th stage martial artist or even a 10th stage martial artist, not to mention 50 small rain coins, even 50 or 500 small rain coins would not help, let alone 50 small rain coins. Chen Pinggan stood upside down, closed his eyes and pondered. Turning over and over, he still couldn't think of an answer that satisfied both sides. Did he really have to personally cut off Pei Qian's martial arts path because of that? What if in the future? Previously in the Col, facing the mountain and lake wild cultivators who harbored evil intentions but didn't cause a tragedy, Chen Pinggan said, "Fortunately, the worst result didn't happen, so the reason can still be talked about again. Otherwise, Chen Pinggan wouldn't have to be so roundabout and fight with their own abilities." These were some of the changes Chen Pinggan made after he proposed to ask oneself honestly during the battle at the border inn. After the battle at Old Dragon City, he learned about the subsequent changes at the mountain gate of the Tongye sect through Huang Ting. That was because Chen Pinggan felt that he should take a small step back. Things differed from place to place, and from person to person. He should learn more about this small step and ponder more. Otherwise, the world would use having a clear conscience as an excuse everywhere, and there would be more wrong and wrong. Pei Qian, who was angry at the fish for not giving her face, suddenly touched her slightly painful cheek, only to find that Sui Yuyu was winking at her. Pei Qian followed Sui Yoyo's line of sight and saw Chen Pinggan not far away. His brows were tightly furrowed, not quite the same as usual. Sui Yuyu withdrew his finger that was flicking Pei Qian's cheek with water droplets and continued to look into the distance. Pei Qian gently put down the fishing rod and tiptoed to Chen Pinggan's side. She squatted there and stared at her master's brows. Could it be that her master realized in hindsight and now began to feel sorry for the 50 small summer coins that had been wasted? Chen Pinggan opened his eyes and looked at the black charcoal face that had not yet turned white from the wind and the sun. He asked with a smile, "What's wrong?" Pei Qian thought for a moment. "Master, is there something worrying you? Tell me about it." Chen Pinggan slightly exerted force on his wrist and turned his body upside down, returning to his normal standing position. Then he sat down cross-legged, somewhat hesitant. The matter was too far away and the reason was too great. Wasn't Pei Qian a little too young now? Would his words and emotions be like a heavy boulder that pressed down on her shoulders? Chen Pinggan took off the blade-strengthening gourd and drank a mouthful of medicine wine. The cool breeze of the mountains and rivers gently caressed his face, which made Chen Pinggan's state of mind slightly relaxed. One who was less than 100 years old often had worries for 1,000 years. After drinking the wine, Chen Pinggan smiled and narrowed his eyes, mocking himself in his heart. Was he a bit like a scholar now? He turned his head and said with a smile, "It's related to you. Do you want to hear it?" Pei Qian swallowed her saliva and immediately began to reflect on what mischievous things she had done along the way. She probably already knew that it was not a small matter, so she said with a bitter face, "Can I not hear it? Wait until I'm a little older and can remember more things. Master, can you tell me more about it?" Chen Pingan touched her little head. It's not about anything good or bad. It's just some words from my heart. You don't have to worry about being pinched by the chestnut. Without any burden, Pei Qian immediately sat up straight and faced Chen Pingan, who was sitting sideways. Her eyes were smiling. She held the 2 bamboo sabers and swords at her waist and pretended to say, "Master, please speak. I'm all ears." Chen Pingan smiled and turned slightly to sit down. The 2 of them sat facing each other. He asked, "If one day, your saber art, sword art, and fist art are all better than Master's, and then you encounter something where Master says it's right but you think it's wrong, what would you do?" Pei Qian said without hesitation, "I'll listen to Master. What else can I do?" Chen Pingan smiled. "Think about it carefully." Pei Qian began to scratch her head and said with a bitter face, "But I just think that what Master says is right, and what Master says is wrong. Chen Pingan was silent. Pei Qian had to continue to think about it blindly. Anyway, Master didn't seem to be in a hurry. Pei Qian suddenly asked with a smile, "If one day, I'm more powerful than Master, how powerful will I be?" Chen Pingan said, "For example, the old thief Du mentioned by Huang Ting and Du Maro of Tongyi sect, both of them are in the ascendant realm." Chen Pingan added with a smile, "For the time being, we will only talk about cultivation, not good or evil." Pei Qian opened her mouth wide and exclaimed, "Oh my God, if you're so powerful, you must have a mountain of gold and silver at home. Can you count the money? It's too tiring to count money, but if you don't count it clearly, you will be afraid that someone will steal a few. Alas, when can I have the troubles of the rich?" Chen Pingan looked at the tanned little girl who was getting more and more worried. He couldn't help laughing, leaned forward, and patted Pei Qian's head gently. "In my hometown, there is a military sage, Master Wan, who is good at forging iron and swords. In retrospect, there is one thing he did very well. When it comes to accepting disciples, Master Wan will not only look at the aptitude, but also look at whether the person is of the same mind and can walk the same path. He will not find some disciples who are very talented but have different temperaments, or some disciples who will only stand up and fight when their master has a conflict with others." Pei Qian wanted to say something but stopped. In the end, she didn't say anything. Chen Pingan continued, "Back to the original question, if you have a dispute with Master, what should you do? Don't always think that Master is right. Master is not a saint and will make mistakes. We should do what we did today. You and I should sit opposite each other and talk about what is right and wrong. We should listen to the one who is right and wrong. I, Chen Pingan, will not use my identity as your master to suppress your reason. If you are very powerful at that time, you can kill me with a punch, but you can't rely on your high cultivation to do whatever you want, regardless of the reason I, Chen Pingan, told you." Pei Qian's tears were glistening. In fact, she didn't quite understand, but she always felt that it was a very sad thing. Especially when Pei Qian heard Chen Pingan say "kill me with a punch," Pei Qian was almost sad to death. Pei Qian felt so wronged that he turned around and sat down. He secretly shed tears and didn't look at Chen Pingan, who was talking nonsense. Chen Pingan sat back in his original position, facing the lake. The spring breeze rippled the water surface. He stretched out his palm and raised it again and again. Reason is actually divided into high and low, just like the circle of flowers on the mountain peak. Master once met a little fox demon in a place called Colorful Clothes Country in a rundown temple. She liked to read novels about scholars and beauties and caused trouble to people. She never really harmed people, but instead helped to shelter them from the wind and rain. This time, we met that yellow earth cow who would rather die than turn over. Then, does this mean that when the demon race attacks the Great Wall of Sword Chi, we can skip the heroic sacrifice of the sword cultivators who have been at the tip of the sword for thousands of years to the south, pity them, and question why the sword cultivators are so cruel? Are there no good people in the demon race? Pei Qian's back was still facing Chen Pingan. She sniffled and said, "I know this. These people don't distinguish between right and wrong, and don't distinguish between reason and size." Chen Pingan drew the biggest circle with one hand, and raised the other hand above his head. But Master Wen Sheng, and Master Bai, who is rumored to have helped the human race forge the cauldron and draw the mountain map, I think they are the ones who are qualified to talk about the righteous reason. We are far from it. But why would they be imprisoned in the forest of merits and virtues, and imprisoned in the Xiongzhen Tower? Is it because of this that we feel that reason is useless? Is there no good and evil karma in the world? Pei Qian turned around and sat beside Chen Pinggan. She lowered her head and said, "But some bad people live better than good people." Chen Pinggan smiled and said, "So in the capital of the Nanyuan Kingdom, the old monk of the Temple of Heart Reflection said that the world will always be in debt to good people." Pei Qian asked softly, "What should we do?" Chen Pinggan did not drink the medicine wine in the blade-strengthening gourd. Instead, he took out a bottle of Osmanthus wine, opened it, and took a sip. He smiled and said, "It's probably in the book waiting for us to find it." In the distant forest, the yellow earth ox was prostrating on the ground, deep in thought. Although Sui Yoyo's expression was indifferent, he had been listening attentively. Pei Qian wiped her tears and said with a smile, "Master, not long after we left Tail Ferry, when we were cooking, how did you hum that folk song in your hometown? How come there are no lyrics? Hum again, I really want to learn." Chen Pinggan smiled and said, "That was taught to me by my best friend. You can make up whatever content you want. In my hometown, you can use it to ridicule and scold people. You can use it to relax while working. You can also use it to accompany wine." Chen Pinggan drank a mouthful of Osmanthus wine and began to hum in a low voice. He pointed at Pei Qian with a smile. "Waiter, I've read some books and learned a lot of words. I've accumulated a lot of knowledge, but I can't sell it for much." Ayo. He was talking about her, Pei Qian. Pei Qian was overjoyed and could not help but blurt out, "Stinky tofu is delicious, but I can't afford it." Chen Pinggan smiled knowingly, "There are demons and monsters in the mountains, and water ghosts in the lakes and rivers. I was so scared that I turned around and found that I had been away from home for many years." Pei Qian echoed, "Eat stinky tofu." Chen Pinggan drank again and pointed elsewhere. Unfortunately, it happened to be Sui Yoyo's side. It did not matter. Which family's little girl has the fragrance of orchids on her body? Why is her face covered in tears? Don't you think it's pitiful? Pei Qian nodded vigorously. "It's so pitiful that you can't eat stinky tofu." Chen Pinggan squinted his eyes and smiled. He pointed up and hummed softly, "Teacher, what should we do? There's a little paper kite basking in the sun on a tree branch." Pei Qian held her stomach and laughed, "Eat stinky tofu smells good." Over at the bamboo house, Zhong Shanfeng and Xu Yuanxia looked at each other and smiled. Zhu Lian closed his eyes and smiled, shaking his head. Lu Baixiang patted his knees lightly. For the first time, Sui Yuyu was not angry. Instead, he covered his mouth and smiled, his eyes narrowed. Wei Xian rested his chin on his hand and tilted his head. He was already squatting at the entrance of the bamboo house, looking at the back of the little girl, Charcoal. Master and disciple, singing the same tune, amidst the green mountains and clear waters. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.